I think this is really a budget workshop. I'm gonna hold off on public comments for the moment, you know. So we're just gonna move into the budget discussion, because this is really, we had originally scheduled a meeting for last Wednesday, so that's what this is about. Yeah. And and so we've been provided with a copy of the draft, sort of town operational budget. I just want to be sure everybody got a copy of that.
Yeah.
And then, Vika had a memo, that sort of summarizes the various changes, and then there was some other backup, information. So I think we can start. I mean, I don't think Vika needs to go through the whole memo because it's pretty well explained, but if there's anything in particular you want to highlight.
Yeah, the only thing that I would like to highlight is with the COLA, I said that I would provide the difference between 3% and 4%. And then the only suggestion that I would have is if we're going through the budget discussion, maybe do it through department at a time and have kind of the board, start with the admin and everyone go through any questions or discussions, just so we're not jumping from department to department. It just makes it so I keep a little bit more organized and have a better idea of what I need to do. But other than that, I don't have any suggestions or comments.
And did you figure out what the difference between the 3% and the 4%?
I did, yes, and Andrew helped me with that to make sure that the numbers were accurate, so memo, I mentioned that I have 4% for COLA recommendation for town employees. Usually what we do is wait for other towns to kind of collectively see it. This year, so far in the memo, it does describe all of the towns that are mentioned. All but 2 of them are recommending 3%. I am asking that the board consider 4%, and then I looked at the difference of what it would be. So between 3% and 4%, for wages, it's a difference of $3,449. So if you choose to do 4% versus 3% for all of the town employees, the wage increase for taxes would only be $3,400. Withholding is 281, and retirement is 183. So in total, the difference between 3% and 4% is $3,833.65. So it's obviously for right now in the budget, it is 4%. So if you would like me to bring it down to 3%, then the entire budget would be dropped down by $3,800.
As far as that goes, how do we compare to other towns in past years? Are we typically less?
With the COLA?
Yeah.
So what I've done since I've been the town administrator, we meet, GPCOG has a Southern Maine managers meeting every single month. And so during the budget process, we all communicate in terms of which towns are recommending what. And in the past, what I've done is I have tried staying slightly below what the average recommendation was for other towns, just recognizing that, we're competing with towns like Cumberland and Yarmouth and bigger towns. This year, I kept it at 4 because it has been 4 increasingly or consistently the last couple of years. This year, I kept it on 4 until I found out what that average was. It is 3 for most of the towns. And so I am asking the board to see if they would keep it at 4 as to what the budget is, but if you want to bring it down to 3, then I can make that change.
Okay, so does anybody else have any questions about the cost of living increase?
No.
I think it's, we're not finalizing the budget tonight, so I think that's just information for the future.
Yeah.
But I think we need to look at the whole budget in context to make that decision, but we do hear the recommendation. Okay. So I think I agree with Vika's suggestion. We just go through sort of department by department, and I think just for, to make it coherent, if the public has questions on any of the departments, I think we'll sort of conduct this more like a workshop. If the public has questions, it would be good to cover them in that department. So just, if I forget, remind me and you can come up and ask questions. So starting off with the first, department, well, I will also say one thing that is in the packet that was kind of illuminating was, looking at, the relationship between the departments and revenue, sort of the wages that are paid out in that department versus the revenue collected. And we had both the 2025, but then also to date the fiscal year 26. So I think that information was provided both in a tabular format and with graphs, just so we could see it. I mean, I would add, we're not a business, we're not trying to cover our wages necessarily by our revenues or anything like that, but it is, I think one thing we want to look at is if we're really experiencing a lot more expenses than we are, our wages are out of balance with maybe, say we have fees that we can, charge, for example, solid waste is a good example, then maybe we should be considering it. So we can use it as sort of justification for adjusting fees potentially, but also just gives us a sense of where the revenue comes from, the outside revenue in the town, and of course, excise tax is a pretty big one, actually. So, and I didn't realize it was that big. I mean, that.
And that's just for cars.
Yeah, that kind of shocked me. But anyway, did anybody have any questions before we move on to the departmental budgets about this analysis of the salary and revenue comparisons? So does everybody get the first, the first sheet is for the fiscal year 25, and then the other one is to date. And the only thing I noticed sort of a significant, and it might be just the timing, but there was a pretty significant decrease in, well, I guess they're all down, for example, the harbor master wages, fees are significantly lower, but that's probably because we haven't hit the spring season yet. Is that why?
Yes, they, in fiscal year 25, and in fiscal year 25, they were lower, so we collected less than what we expected to, based on the budget. But to date, they're even lower because this, fiscal year goes through June 30th, and most of the tie-ups and mooring fees and things like that are gonna start coming in between April and June.
I would say though, in 25, the transient tie-up fees were like 6,000, but to date, they've been about 1,700. And I don't expect we're gonna see a ton of transient tie-up fees between now and the end of the fiscal year. So that's.
Those are the tie-up fees. So now as we start selling them January 1st, those are for the outwards.
Oh, okay, all right. So, and what are the stone wharf permits?
No, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. You're
Yeah.
right, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I misspoke.
Yeah, so the transient tie-up fees are people who come once in a while and
Yes,
pay.
yeah.
The stone wharf permits, which I expect we'll see a flood of them in the spring, those are for boats that get a permit to tie up at the stone wharf. So anyway, but, and then our solid waste fees, for example, for the full year, fiscal year 25, the salary attributed, the wages attributed to solid waste were 35,000 and the fees were 67,500 or 600. So pretty big differential there. So. And one thing I think that we are already almost on par with on the parking attendant fees versus wages versus fees, we're pretty much. So even though we bumped up with the park enforcement, we do have the fees cover a good portion of that. So that's a wash right now. Almost, right? Yeah.
It's a significant increase than anything we've ever done, and we are. On a monthly basis, the deputy clerk is sending out notices to people, and then after 3 months, if we don't hear from them, we are regularly sending them directly to collections.
And we have a boot, so.
And we have food, and I sent a letter to an individual today who owes us almost $1,000 of parking tickets. indicating that if we don't get that squared away, then we will put a boot on, every time there is a ticket and not take it off until it's paid.
Yep, I would like to ask about the transient fees. So those are paid in the box at the dock. I've just always wondered, would it be possible to have a QR code?
That's how they're paid.
It is QR code. Okay. It. Okay.
They, during the springtime, Gennaro will take laminated paper and literally staple it onto the
Each of them.
deck.
Okay.
And then we have them in a variety of different areas.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we've had the QR code down there. I think the first year I was the town administrator.
Since I haven't had a boat.
Yeah.
That's what it really.
The hope is to do something like that at the transfer station. Right now, we're still not sure how we're gonna separate, because right now that money just automatically goes into our account every time somebody does it.
Mhm.
So when we're doing reconciliation, it's, $12, $22. We're not sure how we can separate having it come from transfer station and from transit, so once we figure that out,
Yeah.
there's gotta be a way, but
Yeah.
it hasn't been a priority.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so if there's no questions on that analysis, but I appreciate the staff doing that, because it is kind of
It's
enlightening.
impressive to see.
Yeah.
That's very good.
So moving on to Department 1300, administration and the Board of Selectmen, since we're such a big expense here. I think there are a couple changes. There's a reduction because of the arrangements now we have with CTC, and we're not buying annual passes. So that's a reduction, and then there's an increase in contracted services for an additional 3,000 for the use of the hall. And I think we have a separate discussion about the hall and the hall memorandum of understanding, so I really don't want to get into I think it's better to leave that discussion for that, but just make sure everybody sees that. And Vika, can you just explain the difference between 3405, which is meetings at the hall, and 5,000 contracted services?
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, the $3,000, I put it under contracted
Okay.
services, it should have been in the meeting at the hall.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for that.
So we'll cover whether, right now there's a recommended $3,000 increase for the use of the hall. And so that should be on line 3505, 3405.
3405, yeah.
Okay. So the 2026 budget for administration was 360,820. This coming year, the recommendation is 375, 720. That's about a 4% increase. So some of that is wage increase, and then of course some of it is just these particular items that have been identified. So any questions on Department 1300 administration and Board of Selectmen?
None.
Okay. And Richard, none?
No.
David?
Yes.
Okay, does the public have any questions on the administrative budget 1300? Yep,
I think it's a very easy question. On line one, full-time wages, it is showing 6.17%, because there's also a wage increase along with 4%.
yep,
Is that accurate?
and so there's a wage increase in the town administrative salary besides the 4% cost of living. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no questions, we'll move on. So the next one is Department 1400, which is the assessor. Vika mentioned in her memo that, it's a bit of an unknown because we're gonna have to find a new assessor. So, I think we're just flat funding it for the moment. So any questions on that?
What happens if that jumps drastically?
Yeah.
Well,
Because
the
looking-
goal is to find an assessor between now and the finalizing of the budget.
Okay,
If closer towards the end of the budget season, if we don't have something in line, then what I'll likely do is provide a recommended amount to put in there as a placeholder based on what the going rate is at the moment. For
Okay.
assessors.
So looking at the typical salary for an assessor, it's significantly higher than what we have here if we need them for,
Typically, assessors
Much more.
don't work for a town only one day a month.
okay,
And you're right, it's significantly lower, but this is based on them coming in and working for the town only one day a month.
just one day a month, okay. Good, thank you.
Any other questions on Department 1400 assessor? Okay. Department 1650 elections and the elections, again, pretty much flat, no changes there.
Yep.
Any questions?
Nope.
No, okay. Next one, 1700 is planning. And so the major change there is we had Viewshed, which is our GIS consultant, working on some maps for the planning board on some zoning changes. So that was in there and that has been removed, the $5,000, I guess. That was contracted services, though it doesn't show up in the previous year unless I'm missing it, right?
The contracted service,
Yeah, is it?
so that particular cost
Oh,
is split
it's-
between 2 years.
Yes, I see it. So it is, it's under the, it's 8,000 represents that additional 5,000.
Correct.
So, okay. So one thing I would add is that I think based on what Loren said, you're gonna need some contracted services, or she'll need some contracted services for the comp plan. So I just think we wanna be sure we don't overlook what that need is. And I think that Loren and Judy can figure out what that might be, and it might be that it's, I think it would be in fiscal year 27. So they could figure out between the two of them what might be needed. But, so just a note there. So any questions on planning? This is the planning board and the GIS services is pretty much what's covered in this section. Yep, Bob,
Just a quick question, where are we on the work she was doing?
sorry,
Yeah,
just so other people can hear.
Bob Ernest, 351 North Road. There was work that Duche was doing to upgrade or update, survey data versus online imaging data. Is that still underway?
So Judy has done two things. She's updated some of the parcels where we've given her parcels to update, and then she also updated. We adopted the FEMA 100-year floodplain maps, and so that changes the boundaries of our resource protection zone. So she made those changes. And so those we've been awaiting the planning board public hearing on those. So that's where we're at on that. But that work's all been completed.
Is the new GIS data reflected in the GIS viewer online or not until the?
No, I don't think she's changed we actually talked about that. I think she's still using the older data, but she corrected some of the parcel data, but in that correction, it makes some else out of line. And her message to me was, if people are doing boundary surveys for property transfers, we should be providing her with those and she can correct the parcels. So that would be the way to go. Or if somebody wants to correct their particular parcel, that's the way to go. Okay. So any other questions from the public on Department 1700 planning? Okay. Moving on to Department 1900 legal services. So this is all contracted services through Drummond Woodson now. And Vika did mention in the town administrator's memo that there is an increase in the hourly rate of our current attorney. I forget, for $275 an hour. So that turned out to be about an estimated $1,200 increase for that line item. So does anybody have any questions? And of course, we are estimating the cost of legal services. And for example, budgeted amount in fiscal year 25 was 23,000. We spent almost 17, and 26, it's 20,000. To date, we spent about 13. It is an unknown. We also could have a year where we exceed the budgeted amount. This also includes all the services, legal services. We lumped them all together now. They're not distributed through the departments. So David, any questions about legal? Richard?
No.
Okay, Liza?
Nope, all set.
Public? Nope. Okay, Department 2100 Law Enforcement Services, again, in the town administrator's memo, there are two potential uncertainties here. One change, one is an increase from 1.5 to 2 hours a day for traffic enforcement on the island. And as we just discussed, it's, it's covering its costs pretty much. I do think come the summer, there's going to be more places to also have to deal with traffic enforcement. And then, the second one is contracted services for the, sheriff's office. And I think if you read the memo, that's a pretty uncertain service for this year. So, anything else you want to add to that? We just don't know, right?
I did receive an email today cause I asked for an updated contract of what that would look like if it was full-time coverage, just in case if we get lucky. And so it is a couple $1,000 increase from last year's to this year's, if we have the full-time coverage. In April is when we should know what is happening. So my recommendation is to keep this the same, because it is a greater chance that we will have 50% coverage, in which case the board can either remove $20,000, $15,000 or reallocate it somewhere else versus have to put it back in.
And we'll know that in April, correct?
Well, we should know in April, as far as whether the sheriff is going to be split between Shebig and Lawn, in which case the costs would be less than what the full-time contract is. So will the service provided for the summer.
So.
So let's just go through the board. David?
Officer mailman will be done.
So Cumberland County determines who they pick, and so if Officer Mailman chooses to come back and agree to splitting his time between Shebig and Lawn, then he will be back. But until they go through the process, they can't tell us who is gonna be here and what coverage we can have.
Does that affect the rental of the house that, they use?
So I have emailed the property owner of the rental of the house. My recommendation is to secure it, to pay for it and still have it. Because if we lose it and next year we do have full-time sheriff coverage, we're probably not gonna get that house back. Plus there's needs coming from fire department and other areas that I think right now there is value to keeping renting that house, as long as we're able to.
Thank you.
Richard, any questions on law enforcement?
No.
Liza?
Yeah, so if we were to have him 50% and shared with Long Island, we still will incur some costs of having him, the position move back and forth.
So that would be all discussed and determined once we know what happens.
Thank you.
So,
So the next department, so any questions from the public about law enforcement services? Okay, and since Eric just arrived, I think we'll skip over fire department and come back to that because, I think he and Vika met with the fire department, so we'll give him a minute to get organized. And I think you may have had the same confusion I did. I didn't, only because Vika reminded Mark that the meeting started at 5 tonight. Is that?
When was the schedule at 5?
It was, I think it was, I don't know, when we canceled the meeting last week. I think we proposed to start this meeting earlier.
Also, it is my packet, didn't have a sheet that also has the list of items, so I didn't have it on there either, and it wasn't online. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. It's on the agenda, I think, right?
Yeah.
We were missing that.
Richard provided the agenda.
Okay, well, so I think that's on me. I should have reminded everyone, and to be honest, I had forgotten, so I apologize. So, when we canceled the meeting last week, one of the proposals was to start this meeting earlier because we're really combining two different meetings, so I apologize. So we'll come back to the fire department, which after this, but let's move on to code enforcement. And, as you can see, no significant changes in code enforcement, Department 2400. Any questions about that? David?
Nope.
Richard?
Nope.
Liza? Nope. Any questions from the public about code enforcement? Okay. Department 2500, which is harbor master and shellfish. We had a couple changes, so the mooring fees, the mooring software fees are now paid for by the mooring owners when they register their moorings. And then, I think that's the only real significant change. I would say one thing that we have marine supplies that show up under Public Works and marine supplies that show up under Harbor Master. Maybe some is repairs and maintenance and some is like, I don't know, line and other things, but I'm just wondering at some point if we should consolidate all the marine related costs into one department and maybe the Harbor Master department. I don't know. I mean, I would, before we leave this, I guess, does anybody have an opinion on that?
I think that's a good idea. I mean, doing that with the other areas too, that seems to be.
And what I'm thinking of is the contracted services for the floats and pulling the floats out. It's pretty significant, but it's marine related and it's under Public Works right now. So it was me, maybe we turn this into marine something or other and include the harbor master in there. Instead of being the harbor master department, maybe it's the marine infrastructure department or something. But anyway, that's not a big deal, but, so I think the other thing to remind people is, as the town administrators recommended, we review the harbor master job description at some point in case we want to make any changes. So that is on the docket with the Coastal Waters Committee meeting next week to start that process. So any questions on this from the board? Eliza?
If at some point we are looking at having a boat for fire and rescue, would that fall under marine or would that fall under fire and rescue? We don't need an answer right now, but
I think it's probably fire and rescue, but I'm not.
okay, because that would be a whole other marine category.
Right.
Cost.
Yes, the boat is being purchased for fire and rescue, so I think that's why it would fall under that.
Okay.
Any other questions on Harbor Master Shellfish for, the board?
Nope.
Okay. From the public? Mark?
Quick comment,
Yep.
I don't have a problem with keeping the numbers in there right now as a long time know-it-all and taxpayer, but, I think moving forward, maybe I would suggest that the town of Shebig, along with some advice from maybe, Coastal Waters Commission, and maybe talking with Long Island, revisit this department as far as the need for, the actual separate department. Are we actually going to continue funding it? Are we actually going to continue staffing it? What is it actually doing for us? We combine with Long Island and consolidate services at some point for some, summer seasonal, float and wharf control, something like that.
Okay.
And I think we have to, if we charge for mooring, we might have to have some sort of a position in place.
I think if we charge for moorings, we have to have a harbor master technically, and also, and shellfish licenses, we have to have a shellfish warden.
Yeah.
Our shellfish committee is not really fully functional like many towns, since we don't have much of a commercial resource, so I think the town is the state's loosening up those regs, but I think that would be a good thing to sort of send to Coastal Waters to provide some thoughts on.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to animal control, Department 2600, no significant changes there. Anybody with changes on the shelter line there? So any questions on animal control from the board? From the public, and this is a stipended position, just a one time, well, twice a year, but it's just, whether you work or not, you get paid, right? Because it's just a stipend.
The sheltering, what is sheltering? Is that on mainland?
What was that?
The shelter.
Maybe 290.
I don't know what that is,
It's,
Vika.
so it's a quarterly, we have a contract with, a shelter through Cumberland County, so if our animal control officer has to remove an animal from somebody's home or find an animal, they will go over to the other side and a shelter will come and pick them up, and so this is just a quarterly payment for those services.
So we have to pay or not. Same kind of thing.
And they do get, I mean, for how little this department is,
Yeah.
it does get, significant use and, the animal control officer, especially during the summertime, gets frequent calls.
Yeah, I guess I
about
did,
Dogs and all kinds of stuff.
I didn't mean to imply that they don't do their job. What I'm saying is it's irrespective of the number of hours they work and they may. I have no idea whether they're paid fairly or even underpaid, but just trying to make that clear.
I'll just make a comment that I've personally been involved with several of the calls. Having someone whose profession is animal control has been very helpful.
Yep.
Getting a good bang for the payment with that.
Okay, so the next one, which is, pretty big department, 3,100, which of course Jeff just walked out of the room, but,
He'll be back.
Public services, I think if you read the TA memo, there are two pieces of equipment that are being purchased. One is the sand salt spreader for 8,500 and one is the sweep replacement of the brushes for the sweeper, which is 1,200. And that is not, it doesn't qualify as a capital expense, so it's a one-time expense item under equipment. And then the other thing is the replacement of the plate under the ramp at the CTC float. And I'm not sure, Jeff, what is the cost for that? The actual plate, is it like $1,000 or something?
The previous one, because its float was approximately $1,500.
Yeah.
And so I believe we bumped up the price for any other marine incidentals, i.e. the netting along the walkways, which are terrible. We're looking at other options. Better is that only temporary, knowing that in a couple years, those ramps will be replaced by something longer. So trying to come up with some solution and what's currently there, but it doesn't need to be a permanent solution. But again, more marine dollars needed, as that's very heavily used portion of the island.
And then the other thing that's reflected in here is 14,000 for floats. Storage and removal and installation of the floats, which we've been contracting. This will be the third year in fiscal year 27. So while you're up there, anything else you want to add on the public services budget?
Not at this time.
Okay. I think I'm trying to remember, there was something that you said though, that we should consider in your memo. I can't remember, we'll come back to it, but anyway, any questions specifically? Eric?
Part-time wages, can we just review what the change? What, I mean, that's a big increase, I just don't know
Oh, it's switched.
what the,
It's basically, you only have one full timer. And so instead of trying to speak me if I'm wrong.
So last year, we budgeted for 2 full-timers and full-time. In this year and going into the next budget, we have 1 full-timer and 2 part-timers. So you're just really seeing fluctuation between those 2 full-time and part-time. So it's not necessarily that it's a significant increase. It is, but it's because a lot of the money from full-time is being reallocated into the part-time position.
okay, that's helpful.
So the budgeted amount for 2020, for fiscal year 26 was, or in round numbers, 120,000. And what's budgeted for fiscal year 27 is actually, it's a little less than that. So is that right? It's certainly, it's a little bit less than was budgeted.
The
in that
salary,
fiscal year.
yes.
And it's just that it's distributed differently between full-time and part-time. That makes sense to you? Yeah.
The email that I sent the board on Friday with the information, from the packet, there are several links in there. If you go into you have access to the department folder where I put everything department related.
Yeah.
In that department, that it's been shared with you before is also the breakdown of every employee, what their hourly rate, what their salary is, what the current year, what the fiscal year proposed for 27. So if you want the full detail of each employee, it's in there accessible to you.
And you should look at that, so you know kind of how the wages are vary amongst the employees. And, you know, in case, because I do think that's an important part of our job is to make sure we look at those and think that it's fair and equitable. It's Fika's job really to hire them and supervise them and set them, but I think if we need to be comfortable with those amounts. So from the board, any specific questions, any more questions about public services, the budget that's on here right now? Yep,
No.
Eliza?
When I heard about the metal plate, I was assuming it was at the top of the ramp, but you're talking about down on the float that the ramp rolls on? Because I've always thought it was a safety issue to have the swale up there, just saying. Would love a metal plate there. Thank you.
Okay. And I guess the only other thing, and it sounded like you were gonna talk about this in, to me, one of the questions, I guess it comes up under solid waste, so I'll bring it up there. But anyway, so any questions from the public about public services or public works? Mark?
Line questions about specific
Yep.
line items, line item 5020, which is barging.
Yep.
Historically, we've been using about $12,000 to $14,000 a year. But 2026 year to date is $19,500, and I wonder why that's so much. We have an idea about that?
Yeah, actually, I had that circle too. Yeah.
We had
And if you don't, that's
a lot of vehicles go off from maintenance related things is my understanding.
okay. And that almost $20,000 does not include any materials coming.
So this bargain line, any materials, road materials, gravel, things like that, is included within that. And last year, we had a little bit more relative to vehicles going off for maintenance, and that's where the spike was
It
because
would
of
be
that.
included in that barging line and not road materials or winter road materials.
Winter road materials would be for the physical material, but the cost of the barging to get it out here, we put under barging.
And I'll be quick, Carol.
That's fine.
Winter road materials, 4640 is my second question. I see that you're lowering the amount down to 5,000 for the upcoming budget, which is okay. But right now, we're at $12,252 because it's been an icy, snowy winter, so I was wondering why that thing lowered. Why would lower sand and salt? I'm gonna get technical, I'm just curious.
So the guys have been experimenting this year down on the mainland versus what is down on the island. A truckload of sand and salt combination cost more than just a truckload of salt. On the mainland, they will put down pre-salt before a storm, and then once you're done plowing, hit the road with salt again, if the weather seems favorable. So then the next morning, you don't have to go out and slush 3, 4, 5 times a day. So you're using the same amount of material as we experienced in this last storm, about 7 cubic yards of sand and salt. We used about 7 cubic yards of just salt. It cost less. They did not have to go back out the next day then and slush 3, 4, or 5 times. So we're saving on labor hours and equipment usage. Now, every storm is different. This one happened to work out well that way. But we were under the impression that we couldn't put a lot of salt down on the roads. They decided to change that this last storm and see what it did. And the roads were bare dry except for a few drifting spots the next day. So we're taking all that into consideration into next year, saying, okay, less sand and salt mixture versus just salt plain. And we wanted to try to cut the budget in some other areas, knowing that we were increasing the budget in other areas.
And I appreciate that answer.
Okay.
And just, I already think I know this, but if we run out of money for road materials or any of these lines, we can sort of mix it around into with that to make it work mathematically.
The entire department cannot exceed more than 10%. So yes, if there is an increase in one department line item, then as long as we know we're not gonna go over other ones, then we have some flexibility.
Thank you.
And I would just add, and it's not a discussion for now, but as a ground person, I have a little concern about, application of road salt, because it does build up over time. We do have some areas on the island that appear to have road salt impacts. So I think it's a conversation for, the Maine DOT has done a lot of work because they've replaced a lot of wells because of road salt. So I think it'd be a good conversation at another time, but I appreciate the explanation. And if I understand it correctly, plain salt is cheaper than a mix of road salt and sand. Yeah, okay.
I'm just curious, what this, so do you think the net amount of salt, in the way you're distributing it, is also less?
I'll let you know in June.
And I guess part of my philosophy here is that no one has to go particularly fast on Shabig. It's a little bit, there aren't any, there's a couple intersections. And yeah, I should talk, right? But anyway, I think it's a little different than, an urbanized area. So it's a separate discussion, but anyway. So any other questions from the public about public works, public services? Okay, moving on to Department 3200 solid waste. And there is a separate discussion tonight about proposed fees. So I think we can leave that discussion. And this is the one where we, the barging costs are pretty significant. So we're looking at $85,000 to barge and for hauling our waste and $60,000 for barging. And so that's a big number just on outside services. And then I guess I'll start. I do have a question on the hazardous waste, which was budgeted at 9,000 and you've cut that in half for this upcoming fiscal year. So if you could explain that one.
So working with mainpaintcare.org and the electronics industry, the free battery recycling industry, and batteries in Westbrook, we are able to, other than labor hours and CDL freight fees, we are able to get these products off the island for a substantial cost decrease.
Great.
Yeah. What we do still have to pay for though is the freon removal, the electronics, and the hazardous waste that is not paint. And we've gone around this discussion with Hazardous Waste Weekend before. And I sent this information out to Vika. To get a company to come out and do a hazardous waste weekend, their initial startup fee just to show up is $2,200. That doesn't include barging fees or any of that. They have a $100 minimum unit required. Their units cost, or what they charge, is $38.50 a unit. So even before we get out of the gate, we're being charged over $4,000. At $38.50 a unit, their units are considered 5 gallons of something or 20 pounds of something, or a combination thereof. With a $4,500 budget, we would have enough left in the budget to service 33 people. Doesn't seem like worth time or effort to do that. Unless you want to increase the hazardous waste budget a vastly large amount of dollars. I think we're doing well at the transfer station now with fees being charged. Making people responsible for their own actions instead of the town absorbing it. The city of Portland only has a hazardous waste day the first Saturday of every month between April and November. And you have to pay $6.50 for a gallon of something. I charge 10 gallons. Okay. We're able to accept hazardous waste all the time, not just one Saturday.
I guess I'm a little confused because I don't think we're licensed to accept hazardous waste, maybe special waste. But hazardous waste per se, which could be things like pesticides, herbicides, those kinds of things.
We can collect it, we can't process it.
Are you, okay, but we must have a volume limit on what we can collect.
So at the paint level, once I hit the 100-gallon minimum, I can get a large volume pickup from paint.org. From a company called Environmental Projects Incorporated out of Auburn. They will come down and pick up yearly all the non-paint items that I have. And that's where the $4,500, most of the money goes towards that process of CTC over, because it can't go over on Casco Bay lines. They meet us on the cousin side, they pick it up on pallets, shrunk wrap, and then they process it in Auburn, they send us the bill. And then we start collecting the process again for next year.
So I guess, again, this is a topic for, I mean, a different discussion, but I guess my goal is to make sure people have an opportunity to dispose of, hazardous materials that present a risk to particularly the groundwater on the island. And even a lot of towns have pharmaceutical pickups, but hazardous waste, particularly things, pesticides, herbicides, those kinds of things are materials that I would be concerned about, solvents. And so I think, Jeff, I'll follow up with you directly about that. And if it's covered already by what the practices you have, that's great. And, I have no issue, but I do think I want to be sure that, people are disposing of them properly, both, not throwing them in the trash, but also not throwing them on the ground. So that's my major concern. We probably are on the same wavelength with that, so I'm not particularly worried. But in the past, we did do a organized hazardous waste part of a day, and it was about $6,000, but I think it's a good $6,000 spent if it does prevent people from disposing of stuff improperly. But maybe the practices you have cover that now. Sounds like they probably do.
We have to be licensed to accept it on a day like that, when nobody is currently licensed to do that. So we're not mixing chemicals, we're not creating dangerous situations. I accept them now in their original containers, then they're in a tote, so if anything leaks, it's caught in the tote. But yeah, in order to, in the past, but things have changed. You have to be licensed to hazardous waste to receive to process it. And all we're doing is collecting it environmental projects than processing.
So I think we can talk about this, you know, down the line. The other thing is, I assume you're aware that the state of Maine is changing, or, is really enforcing their new regulations about the origin of packaging. And so that's gonna change, it could potentially be a revenue stream for towns, but I mean, it is gonna change potentially how, particularly packaging waste is gonna be disposed of, so. So we'll be seeing some changes down, along those lines. Okay, and then separate discussion tonight is in particular the wood waste brush dump, so I don't think we wanna get into that specifically now. So does anybody else have any questions though about solid waste? I think one thing that is in the town administrators, oh no, maybe it's in Jeff's memo. And I think we need to kind of get on the stick with this, is sort of a professional evaluation of the transfer station facility. Is that correct? Right, and so that's not something we have the capacity to do. We tried to do it kind of simplistically several years ago. GP did an analysis, but it wasn't really what we're looking for. So I do think, I don't know if it's this year or next year, but I think we should think about allocating some funding to have a professional evaluation of the transfer station, sort of the adequacy, what we need for upgrades, that sort of thing.
So it was in the budget for this year, plan to have. Like Pierce. From CD McCarr, we've been in contact, he was gonna come out for like a half day and give an evaluation of it, since it's in this year's budget, that money was already allocated.
If money was set aside into a reserve account.
But that's just for a pretty limited evaluation, right? So was that to give you an estimate for what a study would take, or was that? Yeah,
Again, it's gonna be like, here's our budget, don't go beyond it.
right.
What can you tell us for this amount of money? Get us a starting point.
Yeah, what I would recommend is you get an estimate from them about what it would take to do a facilities evaluation for the full facility, and, then we could, then, maybe not in this budget, but we could in a future budget allocate that money or get started on part of it. I think it needs to happen because it's, we've had compactors break, and, should we be upgrading to something else or something different? So I think it would be good to have them do a full evaluation. So you're saying we did have money in the fiscal year 26 budget for them to do that?
There was money set aside into reserve account in last year's, in fiscal year 26 budget process. I don't remember exactly how many,
It wasn't a
but a
ton.
few $1,000 was set aside to do a solid waste evaluation of the transfer station.
And I think we could potentially look and see if there are any grants available to do that too, because there may be. So anyway, that's the other part, yeah. So any other questions, solid waste? Nope, public, Mark?
Very quickly, I know that you've got $40,000 proposed for your brush dump grinding, and I know that we're coming to a head with the brush dump. My specific question, and if you can't answer this now, it's fine. Last year, we budgeted $22,500 or something for grinding, and the invoice that we received was twice that much. Was that situation ever rectified, or was there at least partial or payment within our budgetary allowances made to that previous contractor? That's my question. If that's
They were paid for their work.
Thank you.
And do I understand correctly, they're not interested in coming back to do that one?
To be honest, I'm not interested in working with them after.
Yeah.
What they did and how they charged us for certain services that they provided to island residents without our consultation.
I'm sorry, my real question was, why did that show up more than the actual was 30?
It was,
Oh, you mean in the fiscal year 26? Is that what you mean?
It shows actual
year to date, is that what you mean?
Sorry.
No, I think you're right. So fiscal year 25,
2025 actual, which was $3,200, $3,189.
that's 2025.
Okay,
Oh, you're right.
I
Yeah,
just
so
wondered,
it's missing.
that was my question, why,
Right.
why didn't that show up? That's all.
So I think the answer to your question is yes, they were paid. The second answer is,
Yeah.
yeah, it should be showing up there and it will exceed the 26 budget.
Not a big deal.
Right,
Thank you.
but you're right about that.
I'm amazed with the things that I miss staring at these documents on.
That's why Mark is here. Okay, moving on to,
The actual number was 36,689.
Thank you.
Say it again, 36.
36,689.
so I think we're gonna move on because it's almost 6 o'clock. It is 6 o'clock. We don't need to go through, other than the fire department, I think the contributions we'll deal with in a couple weeks. The other stuff is, basically nothing. I mean, the health services cemetery, I guess if anybody has any other questions on the remainder of the budget, but I would like to move on to the fire department because Vika and Gerhart just had a meeting with them yesterday and I'd like an update from them. And then, we can move on to a couple other things if you want, but let's go to department, 2200, which is fire and rescue services, and if you guys could bring us up to speed in terms of, so we have yet to receive an updated kind of request for next year's budget from the fire department, and I think we're still waiting for that.
I've let Gerhard elaborate on it too, but, we did have a meeting. There were a couple of small changes that were provided at that meeting. There is a one-page document that I put in front of you just to show that information. We met last night until a little after 6:30, so I input that information today and printed out, so you could see based on the document you have from what was in the packet, and that there are a couple of incremental changes. But there are additional ones that are expected that they don't have all of the information for, that we will be anticipating likely recommendation for increase in wages and a few other line items.
Gerhard, do you have anything you want to add?
Oh, there were a number of line items where we asked for some clarification on maybe breaking it apart, because it just seems like they were sort of a lot of things lumped together to probably be separated out, so that was one thing they would get back to us with. But really the big issue was the wage issue, and they made clear that they were really struggling with, I guess they just lost or just had 2 people, sort of retire, so they're down to like 6 individuals, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to get additional volunteers as well as per diems off file. There's no place to put them, so they're kind of up against some real operational issues. At the same time, we made it really clear that as a board and as a town, we really need to have a reasonably projected budget for those wages. So I think they were clear that we, both up against our own respective walls on this issue, and they will do all due diligence they're gonna have a meeting, I guess, this week or first part of next week with the staff they have to, trying to come up with at least some figures for us. And I think it's something we're gonna just have to stay on top of, because if we are left to decide for them, we run the risk of getting halfway into the year and having expenditures go way beyond what was projected, so.
So when you say they're down to 6 individuals, do you mean on the rescue?
Yeah.
And so they're contemplating that they might need a per diem person in the summertime?
Right. And then the issues is where do we find those people and who would actually be willing to come over here, and there's some challenges when, as they said, there's a lot of towns offering those kinds of positions, that have a station where people can stay, that have all the facilities they need and can just walk out door and get in the ambulance. And we don't have that, and so Ralph expressed some concern it may be difficult to enlist those individuals to come over.
Because of the housing, you mean?
Build the housing.
So, okay. Okay, and right now, it looks like there's a 6.7% increase from the previous year based on what we know so far, but what it sounds like is there could be a more significant increase.
Right.
So, and then in terms of the timing, do we have a sense of when they might be able to get us that information?
We were hard pressed to get them to commit to any. I think the only way we're gonna go do it is to keep bringing up the conversation repeatedly and frequently.
Okay, is there anything we can do to help them? Do you know?
I mean, if the board wants to send an email to the fire department on the behalf of the select board,
Yep.
so it doesn't, you know, perceive that it's me nagging them, it's the board wanting this information, it could be helpful, but they did say that they're gonna try to get together next week. And so, I don't know the details when or who's gonna be involved in that, but maybe we can have the EMT, who is a select board member, keep us on top of when the EMTs are going to be meeting.
I will let you know, thank you, that I just heard today that a meeting will be called to discuss this, which has been the chat between all of the EMTs. I'm away next week for a portion of it, so I'm really hoping that can be scheduled when I'm present. So that might delay it, and I do apologize for that, but it's a concern because we've had some EMT, it was a very busy summer last year, you know, there was a record number of calls. And I think that there's a burnout rate that naturally happens with EMTs, and there's a group of us that train together, so we're gonna face the same thing when our cycle of feeling burned out starts to hit. So I think we need to look at that, and having Ralph be a part of the statewide initiative of the coastal islands and the issues that are happening up and down the coast with EMTs and looking at the need for education. I spoke about that up in Augusta, February 4th, 5th. The need for more access to training for EMTs. Right now, we have 5 people on the island who would certify as an EMT if there was a class available on the island, but there are no instructors. And there's no capacity right now through the community college. So it's really very complicated. We also have 2 people that were looking for a program, and it was a 2-year waiting list to get in. I know they probably are EMT training classes happening that are not, they didn't know about, but it's a big bottleneck. And
One question that I just thought of, has the fire department ever looked into, and it might not even be within the town's cost, to see what it costs for the town to have one of the existing island EMTs or personnel to be trained to be able to do the trainings? So then we have that resource within Pasco Bay.
that's worth looking to do. I think probably Ralph could answer that question. I did have a conversation with the instructor who trained the group of us 3 years ago. It's really difficult to find anyone who will do the instruction, and it's a big significant expense to hire an instructor. So I don't have an answer for that, but I know the amount of training it would take to certify as an instructor is well beyond anything that we have other than Ralph. And it takes a lot more experience than what we have as EMTs here on Shabby to become an instructor.
It's a pretty long list of certifications that you have to get.
Yep.
And hours that you have to get certified, and do that kind of teaching. Where they can operate independently, come to an island and do a whole class is substantial.
Okay, so I think relative to the budget, because we should move on to the regular agenda shortly, but I think the bottom line is, if I understand it, sort of to be determined on the fire department. I think if people are comfortable, I will send out an email on behalf of the board and just, express our willingness to help in whatever way we can, and that, until we can get those numbers, we're kind of up in the air budget wise. And it does sound like housing for a per diem person, or even if the sheriff doesn't work out full time. It sounds like housing's gonna be important.
But I'm not sure we need someone overnight for a period.
Well, I think that's what would be really helpful, and this is where I think the fire department needs help, is for them to articulate specifically what the needs are. And I think if I heard you correctly, Earhart, that's really what is sort of lacking, is sort of the backup and, kind of, description of what's needed so that we can act responsibly as a select board to fund those things, right?
And there's been recent changes, so that's part of the fluidity. Okay, thank you.
So I think maybe we can find a way to help them. Maybe we can get somebody, from a neighboring community that could, Town of Yarmouth or something, could sit down with them and help them. I don't know, we can throw another somewhere. But it is a priority, and until we can do that, we won't be able to finalize the budget. And then I think I will just take the rest of the budget in, as a whole. We do have, the school budget in there, but I don't think they've even really met to.
What's in there is the first draft that was
Yeah.
provided to me by Aaron.
So the only other area in the budget that I think, had some increases that are significant, but it's just, normal life, is the health insurance increase, which was estimated, and we had really had a major increase last year, and it's mostly more people taking advantage of health insurance and then the overall cost going up. And so right now, the cost for health and life insurance for the town staff will be, it's estimated to be about 145,000. And to put it in perspective, in 2024, it was a little over 100,000. So it's a big increase in general, but that's not unique to us. But we also have younger staff, which is a good thing, taking advantage of the benefits. So, that is one of the reasons they're even working for the town, I'm sure, so.
I just noticed in a number of different departments, the workman comp, the line items was lower, consistent.
Yep.
Multiple places, and I was curious why that was, and I didn't, calculate what the offset what it might be towards the regular insurance, but I was just curious why that actually went down.
With the workers' comp, what they do is they look at, we have it through MMA, Maine Municipal Association, and they basically assess it every year. And we often are receiving checks now because our employees aren't getting into accidents on the job, and we're not having to file for workers' comp and having it cost, the insurance company more money. So the last couple of years, it's gone down because we pay it up front. And then at the end of the year, they send us a check that ends up being put in that budget line item and decreases it as a result of good performance.
Right.
So any other questions on any of the other budget, budget departments? I think the school, we should just hold off on. You do have the numbers in there as a first draft, and there are some significant increases and decreases, so you really have to look at it closely, not just at the bottom line. Any other questions about the budget as a whole? How about from the public? Any of the other departments? I can count on you, Mr. Bennett.
Quickly, benefits and insurance.
Yeah.
I've been going to most all of the finance committee meetings, and one of the lines that continues to show up is to discuss the family health insurance benefit that the town currently offers at 80% to our employees. The school does not offer that. Is that still up for discussion this year, or is that not going to be visited?
Well, I think the finance committee has sort of put that on the back burner, trying to focus on the capital. The other thing is looking at the school budget. I'm not sure that that's how the school is still operating, so that would be one thing to confirm, is that are they still just doing single subscriber or not? So I think that's kind of in the finance committee's hands, and when they are planning to evaluate that, I'm not sure. Maybe
Gotcha.
not this fiscal year for
Thank
this
you.
budget, I don't know. And I think in many cases, the way we would have, if we make any changes, it would be implemented with new employees as they're hired. We typically, I don't think people typically reduce benefits for existing employees, because that can be kind of dicey. So,
Yeah, I was just wondering why I kept seeing it.
yeah, I think because they're just trying to keep it on their list of something to look at.
The town employees, the health insurance plan we have participate in the lowest plan offered from the municipal, so we get a bulk. So it is a bit cheaper, even though it looks significantly higher, and so. The school, they have a private plan through Anthem. And so I think that what the purpose of that was because the school offers 90% or 100% for an individual because the cost is more significant to make it more likely. Whereas with the town, they're able to offer 80% because the cost is lower because of the bulk rates that we get through MMA. But we are all one town, so at some point in the future, it might be wise to consolidate and have those kind of costs be under the same vendor, whoever that might be.
Yeah, I just didn't know why I kept saying it on that list. Now I know it's finance committee's list, so.
Yep. All right, so I think we're gonna move back into the regular agenda for the meeting, and so back to item number 2, public comments on items not on the agenda for discussion but not action. Does anybody in the public have anything they want to bring up that isn't on the agenda? Okay, next is town reports. So Vika, town administrator report, and maybe I missed it, but I don't think we had any departmental reports, right?
Nope, not this time around. Next one, we'll get those to you. So it is just a TA report, just a couple different things worth mentioning. I'm not gonna bother reading through the whole entire thing. Couple of committee members needed, 2 on the planning board, 1 in coastal waters and 1 in facilities. So if anyone is interested and knows anybody, please let us know, especially planning board. They only have 3 members, so they cannot meet unless all 3 members are present. It's difficult for them to do that because they're all busy. And they are extra busy now with all of these coastal restorations projects coming down, in front of them. So having at least 1 person, if not 2 people, join that board to offset the burden that the 3 members have been dealing with would be really helpful. The comprehensive plan committee, so the town adopted last time, the board adopted the ad hoc committee. We have a person from the planning board that has volunteered at their last meeting. And so the select board needs to designate a member of one of you to serve as the board's representative. So if you could please choose tonight, that would be great.
Okay, and I think I was gonna suggest, and I did check with them, if Richard would consider serving.
Yeah.
Just, I think, sort of to spread the work around, we've got the housing committee, so if you're willing, I think it would be good if you could represent us. I don't know how other people feel. I don't know that we need to take a formal vote. It's just a consensus. But David, how do you feel about Richard serving on the comp plan committee?
I'm happy.
And you're not heartbroken that we're not?
I'll do it.
How about you, Earhart?
That's fine.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, okay. You good with that?
I'd heartily endorse.
Yeah.
Richard.
Well, thank you all. for your-
And the ad hoc committee is, sort of the advisory committee to Loren. She's doing the lion's share of the work, but I think it will be important to bring back to us any questions that come up. So that would be, so it's a 2-way street. You're representing us, but also coming back and letting us know what's going on. So that would be great. And then, I think if you're willing, and when we don't know when the first meeting.
No, we're still compiling members right now, so, once we collect all the members. The board did suggest, and the committee does need 2 members at large, so. The committee is not a committee until we have 2 members at large, and collecting volunteers is a difficult process right now, so if there is anybody out there who wants to be on this. we need 2 members from the public to participate, so.
Needs to be residents, I mean, year-round residents.
No, it does not.
No, it's not.
I don't think it was a
It
requirement.
wasn't, there wasn't a requirement, so it could be a seasonal, it could be a year round, it could be a body that wants to participate.
And I think it would be good to get some seasonal representation, that we know people who are interested.
Is there, it would be good to have a way to communicate that to the public. So it'd be nice to have a communication go out.
I think Loren didn't somebody post it on the town website?
It's posted,
Okay,
we can send out a text alert.
Yeah.
Knock on everyone's.
I like those text alerts, as
Okay,
you know.
I'll send out a text alert.
Thank you.
Okay. So anybody in the audience who's interested in serving on the comp plan committee, we need 2 members at large, so you're invited. All right, then on
Bob
this,
has a question.
oh, Bob, sorry.
If that publicity also mentioned the duration of the committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, anticipated duration of the committee, that might help.
Yeah.
Keep people interested.
I think we could direct them to the info on the town website, which says all that jazz, and it doesn't have to be. I do think if there's somebody in the seasonal community that's interested, it would be great to have some representation. You know, it would require them to maybe attend some of the meetings remotely, but in the past, the comp plan committee was a mix. Okay. And then on these recently awarded grants, I was a little confused. So were you asking for our feedback on these 2 grants, the GPCOG and what's listed as GEI grants? Is that what you were asking?
Hold on,
They're lumped together, I think.
no, I have it in front of me, this was the one part of the packet I didn't reread today, so I don't remember what I wrote on.
So you said we received $98,000 worth of
Correct.
grants,
Yeah.
and Loren was very instrumental in
Yep.
getting those
Yep.
grants,
Yep.
so we should owe her a debt of gratitude for already generating more income than she's costing. But I
Oh,
think
so the
then you,
last sentence,
Yeah.
that shouldn't have been in there.
okay,
So this is just showing you, the grants, so we were notified within the last week and a half of these grants, being received, so. 2 of them were solely applications that were done by Loren, and one of them, she participated a lot, and so there's the one for us to be able to start doing some work on Cousins Island to determine what kind of needs are down there. There is one relative to the shoreline access work that she did at the beginning of the year, kind of finalizing that and placing all of the proper signage everywhere. And then there was one through GPCOG, and that was relative to anticipated work around comp plan, shoreline access. So there is the GPCOG one that the facilitation that we were planning on doing with Bennett's Cove in the spring, the cost of that is covered within that grant.
okay.
And am I correct in I was speaking with Lauren about this, that the 68,000 is in partnership with Yarmouth?
So the town will receive, yes,
Okay.
that's the short answer.
Okay,
But the town will kind of oversee that
Right.
process.
So they were happy to say, yes, you're welcome to manage the grant. program.
Yes.
Yeah.
right.
It's
We're good at that.
their facility it's owned by Yarmouth, so we need to have their
Right.
input and permission to do
And
that.
I would add that DOT is also a partner on that grant, so that will be helpful for the Cousins Island parking lot.
Okay.
So I think that will be good because then we can give the capital planning committee a better idea of what the cost might be for that facility. So that's really the incentive there. Then the other thing is, in our discussions about these various infrastructure projects, which we have many, we think we should schedule a public meeting. And you have on here picking a date at some point for a public meeting to talk about. I was thinking the stone wharf, but because we have multiple projects we could update the community about. Probably, I think maybe in the month of April or something like that. Does that sound feasible?
I think closer to the end of the budget season, when seasonal residents are coming into
So
town,
maybe May.
I mean, I find that a lot of US select board members are asking me some repeated questions about some of these areas. So if you who are receiving this information as frequently as you are able to fully comprehend the extent of a lot of these projects, then I can only imagine the confusion for a lot of residents, especially the ones who are not here all the time or who are gonna be coming in. So it was just suggestion to maybe have a meeting to have an overview of where all these projects stand, and we'll prepare documents ahead of time with some information, with assistance from finance committee and whatnot.
And now that you've said that, I think May is a better time, like the month before town meeting, to give us plenty of time to get all the. I mean, the GEI will be, trying to finalize the cost estimates and stuff, so we'll come up with a date, we'll come up with some options and run it by you guys, but similar to, we did a meeting on the Stone Pier that was kind of like that.
We should have information about South Shore Drive and the costs for that, so, then it's Cove and barging, so it would be helpful to do something like that.
Okay, so, I think we'll continue on then in the budget unless people have questions, on the agenda. Does anybody have any other questions for Vika about the town administrator's report?
Nope.
Does anybody in the public have any questions on that? Okay. So we've done 2614, that was the draft of the second draft of the budget. 2615 is the discussion of the brush dump usage data and proposed fee and policy. And I gotta say, so Jeff prepared this information and maybe people too, but I gotta say, it was really helpful to have such a thorough analysis of the brush dump usage and volume and, commercial versus residential. It makes it much easier to kind of, move forward with thinking about how to modify the fee. So I just wanna say kudos to you, Jeff, for all the work, because it makes it much easier to kind of understand what makes sense. So everybody in their package should have received that information, if I can find it here, where Jeff tabulated the usage, both commercial and residential, of the brush dump, and then also had a memo recommending the fees.
There's three different attachments relative to this particular discussion, and Jeff had spent the year collecting the data, and then we took that data and put it in to show you the usage and how it's broken down. And then based off the data, I compiled some information about some estimate structure fees to show you what kind of structure fees could be set up to cover the cost of about $40,000 a year that we're taking on as a result of it. And then a proposed a policy for brush disposal rules, so that when people understand what that process would look like. And before you get into the discussion, one correction that I would like to make is, I did get a call from Katie Fowler today. And she just asked that we reference to her as Fowler Landscaping, so that if anyone that's listening doesn't think that it's Katie Fowler, because she has some confusion with her business around that, and she would like it to be referred to Fowler Landscaping, so I told her I would do that.
Yep. Okay. So Jeff, do you have anything you want to say, or do you want us to just ask questions if we have them? Could you, maybe for the public's benefit, who maybe haven't read your memo, could you maybe give us the, the Cliff Notes version of sort of your findings and recommendations?
So I'll go back to the transfer station survey that was done a while ago. Of the 211 responses, 75% of the people said yes, they would approve of charging commercial fees at the brush dump. So, and that wasn't including the maybes. We included the maybes into that category. It went up to a 95% of people were willing to approve charging fees. So with that as a basis, I spent the year waving to everybody as they drove by, kept noting of how much they brought in, how many visits. It's not perfect, because I'm not perfect, but I'm within percentage points of accuracy. All other towns around us charge by the weight scales. We don't have that option. So we charge by volume at the debris, we charge by volume metal. So we can only keep consistently with the materials we have. We all know how much a pickup truck holds. We all know how much a 550 dump truck holds, depending on how high the sides are. We all know an 8 cubic foot yard trailer. So as far as being able to judge and have a conversation with the individuals of how much product you have, it'd be no different than a conversation with the individuals of how much product they have when they're throwing something into a construction debris container. The two towns that consistently charge locally to us are Portland and Freeport. Portland charges $85 a ton, Freeport charges $100 a ton. Now, is it hardwood, is it softwood, cubic yards, airspace, and all that stuff? Vika's first proposal of $42 a ton is half the price of our neighboring mainland communities that still don't have to deal with the barging and shipping and everything else of what we do with the mulch once we chip it, bringing the people over. So initially, it may seem like a very high number for some people to swallow, but if they look at what other communities are charging, we're still half that price.
Wow. And just a clarification, we would be charging by cubic yard,
Correct,
And
that's the only option we have.
right? And unless we got scales, the other towns, they're charging by weight though.
They go on a scale, correct?
Okay.
So did you, in your calculations for on that, did you sort of evaluate what maybe an average version would be from? Yeah, it's somewhat difficult, like you said, materials, understanding materials are very quite.
So, yeah, I mean,
Just curious how you arrived at that.
2,000 pounds is 1 ton, right? A quart of plywood is 4.74 cubic yards. So you can put a quart of plywood in somebody's pickup truck mounted pretty good. If that's brought into the dump, that would be $160, $170 under our format. On the mainland, it would be almost $300. Again, hardwood was more softwood, moisture content, there's a lot of variables.
Right, you basically picked an ingredient and said, how would it compare?
Right, and that's where, again, you have the conversation with the individual. That, oh, there's a lot of airspace in here, it's all branches. Okay, so if it was crushed and flattened, it would squish it down 3 cubic yards instead of 5 cubic yards. And those are the conversations I have every day with people.
David, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Vika how you came to the number that you did and why is it less than other towns?
So I looked at what the cost is and came up based on what we're accruing for the cost right now and what it would take based on the data that was provided, what number we needed. So it's based off of what we spent last year, the data that was collected, and how much we should be charging per cubic yard to roughly cover the same volume and the cost.
And
That's
I
where
guess,
that came from.
so everybody's on the same page, can you summarize what your recommendation is for the fee? The fee is for commercial use.
Commercial use only, still no charge for residential use.
And the fee would be a one-time sort of annual fee plus a per cubic yard fee, right?
Correct, I mean,
Yeah.
there's 3 different scenarios.
I came up with these
Oh,
proposals
okay.
based on his data and shared it with him.
Okay,
Before, so there are two recommendations based on the data provided and covering the costs that we've basically are having. So recommendation one is if you wanna do it per cubic yard, you would charge, the commercial users would basically register with us on an annual basis, it would be $150 fee, and that's to cover the costs of, Jeff and other clerical basically things. And then, the $42 per cubic yard, if you see the graph that was provided, if we charge $42 per cubic yard and we collect the same amount as we did last year, it would bring us roughly to $41,322. The other option is do it by a tiered system, which is basically by essentially small, medium, large load of a vehicle, and what that looks like. So, the graph gives you a couple of different suggestions, and then there was, in the case of kind of a 10% fluctuation, decrease and whether that would cover it, and in most cases it would, so. And this would be specifically for the commercial users, not your average residential, and that's the benefit of being in such a small community is we have a general idea, especially with the data collected of last year, who the commercial users are dumping on the behalf of doing the work for somebody else who is paying them to do it. Versus, the average person who's just cleaning their yard, and dumping.
okay, so more questions from the board, Liza? Sure, go ahead, Earhart,
I was
somebody.
gonna just, do you have a preference of either options and ours? It's easier for you to, you got a small, medium, large, extra large, cause the commercial users, what kind of equipment they're using to bring stuff in. Is that easier for you to do quick load? Or is it easier for you to do the cubic yard?
I think both the customers and myself would adjust to either one. They use the same pickup truck every time they come in. They load it 80% or 100% or partial. So I know individual A has a cubic yard truck. I know individual B has a 6 cubic yard trailer. So it's pretty straightforward when they come in with that trailer and it's now we way up, well, it's more than 6 cubic yards, so we're gonna charge you 8. No different than the commercial dump. They come in with a pickup truck that's mounted full. Okay, well, that's 2 cubic yards, but you're way over the rails, and so we're charging you X. I think if you keep it, the simpler, the better. Give them a flat rate, then they just know that way they can tell the client. I filled up my truck this much, I gotta charge you this much.
So that you're going with a cubic yard.
The option A.
Option.
How expensive is a scale?
Didn't even looking.
I would
I think that would
recommend
be
doing a full
something.
assessment of the facility
Right.
before you look into large investments like that.
Be great.
And you had a question, Eliza?
I do. I had the same question that you just asked. One of my questions, it seems to me that because you know the volume of each of their vehicles, that makes it less subjective, but I would defer to what you find is the best way for you to judge fairly with our business people should be the cost. So, it just seemed to me that having it be based on the tiered might be easier to administer, especially if you had someone else doing if you weren't there for a day and somebody else had to judge that, it would make it easier to have someone else cover for you if it was the tiered system. But again, whatever is your judgment.
We're talking with 8 individuals.
Right,
You have a conversation with the 8 individuals and you create a pattern,
okay,
and the individuals that would cover for me, if they do cover for me, are aware of pickup truck and volume
Great.
side. So I think it would be a small percentage point transition
Okay.
a revenue lost or gain.
Ask a second question. So I think what we're hearing from the board is it's your preference, you know, whatever is your preference on how to charge for the amount of material would be how we would propose to do it. I think that's where they were both coming
Right,
from. with the question.
beyond me,
Yep,
aging 63-year-old man who's only here for a short amount of time. So whoever the next person is gonna be, granted, you could change out this stuff, it's permanent. But I'm just thinking if you keep it simple across the board, that would be the ultimate goal for down the line.
Right.
Yep.
And they basically have a 42 cubic yard as a set measurement. And
Right.
it's one standard.
One standard, they load up their 6 cubic foot truck at that client's property. It's gonna be 6 times 42,
Right.
right into the check.
The one thing to keep in mind through this conversation is if the board does implement something like this, I would recommend implementing a policy that, you know, is similar to the suggested in there and have this begin with the new fiscal year. So it is a kind of preparing and planning for it. And keep in mind, fees and policies is something that the select board has the discretion to change at a regular select board meeting. So if 6 months into the process, we're finding hiccups and there are things that are not working, or even 2 months into the process, it is something that is a lot easier to bring it back to the select board for change and improvement than it is, you know, putting something like this in an ordinance, which is more connected with a town meeting, change.
Plaza.
I have a second question. These are business people. This has a potential for having a significant impact on their business and wanting to make sure that we're supporting those businesses, balancing that with the needs of being fiscally responsible, but also taking care of that brush dump. When, so making sure our landowners who are hiring these business people understand that those are fees separate from the cost of the job that is being done. Would each of these be a ticket that you would provide each time? So that that gets turned in by so when somebody brings in a load of wood, would you give them a document or a ticket that says this is the cost of what you brought in that could then be presented to the people they're doing the work for? Just to make sure there's good transparency and that the customers understand that this is the cost of the wood removal plus this cost imposed by the wood dump.
We have many individuals that bring stuff to the dump for clients.
Yeah.
Washer dryers, refrigerators.
Right.
When I fill out the slip, like, would you like the client's name on here to
Okay.
show that you paid it? Or they bring a blank check and we fill it out, they take the check back.
Okay.
With some of our big players, you know, if they're in daily, you know what? Okay, we'll come up with a fee where you pay every Friday. We'll come up with those details as we move on. Versus somebody that's running in 6 times a day on a Saturday, our office isn't open. You can't process anything beyond a check or cash.
We do have some customers that work off of a credit, so they'll give us $2,000 at the beginning of the year. They come in, Jeff gives them a slip, and we basically then let them know when they're down to, you know, $200 or $100. So everyone works slightly different, but it is a pretty decent system. And every Monday, Jeff is coming in with all the slips and the money
Okay.
that's been collected, and I or Krista stand in front of him and we verify that the ticket matches what was collected and vice versa, and then we put it in. So it's a pretty smooth system that I can't imagine this would change dramatically as a result of it.
Okay.
It would just be more slips to look through every Monday.
Gotcha. Nicely done then. Thank you.
Has anybody had a conversation with the commercial businesses that would be affected by this?
they've had conversations amongst themselves over the past year, as we've talked about this over the past year. I don't think it'll be any surprise that it will happen. I've already had 3 individuals approach me just today. I can have those conversations with them, we can put out a letter to them. It's just, it's no surprise, I don't think.
Right, and I guess where I'm coming from is this is a big change for them. I feel that the board may want to reach out to them to give them an opportunity to comment before we actually formalize and approve, the system. I think to give them an opportunity, I suspect some of them don't like the idea, but I feel obligated that we get their feedback.
I'll just say that actually today, this morning, I got a phone call and then subsequent they followed up with an email communication, which I was gonna bring up my communication, but from one of the major players, wasn't adverse to the fees, because they're just gonna get passed on, but did have a lot of other constructive ideas that would like to have the opportunity to present at some point that makes sense. So I will forward that email to you and get it forward, but.
So I guess what is the sense of the board? Do you wanna give that particular group, the one that will be affected by this fee increase, an opportunity to, they're not in the community in the evening to attend a meeting, and it's definitely on the agenda for the meeting, but I feel like it might be reasonable to reach out to them and say, we're considering this change. Let us know if you have any feedback.
I mean, based on my conversation, I think benefit everybody, including the town. They may have some ideas that are useful and will help the process along. So
Right.
I think if we could do that, it would be wise. And at least then also just had made the offer.
Right. So if I was them, I'd wanna have at least an opportunity to offer my thoughts on it before the board enacts it, because they are kind of a commercial, group that could be impacted. So, how do other people feel?
I think it's okay. I mean, I just feel like we're showing to them, this is what it costs and this is what we have to charge you, but it would be good relations to get their 2 cents about it, but I don't know what forum other than.
Right, I don't know what the best way to do that. I'm not sure we wanna do that. I think we could send out a communication saying, this is the proposal I'm considering. And, they could communicate to us at the next, and maybe we put it on the agenda for the next meeting for action. And they can communicate to us in the meantime about their thoughts on that, either by email, or if they wanna come to the meeting, they can come to the meeting. I just feel like they should have an opportunity. David?
I agree that they should be given a heads up as to what's happening. But I disagree with asking for their feedback. Because I really do believe that this has to be a decision that we make as a board, and we should keep them up to speed on what's happening. But I don't wanna make it a back and forth.
I agree that the board makes the decision, but I personally, and I'm just speaking for myself, would like to understand what their thoughts are about it. It doesn't necessarily mean I wouldn't support it wholeheartedly. I think we do need to recover some of our costs, but I would like Earhart just said, they may have some good suggestions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I think one opportunity of some feedback and give and take to me is reasonable. I admit we don't wanna go.
Yeah.
This isn't a committee that we set up to
Right.
provide a proposal. It's really just, it's a change that I think I would like to give them the opportunity.
Sure.
So that's me, but that's me. If the board's not interested in doing that, we can take a formal vote on it if we want. It's up to you.
No, I think the communication is key.
Yep.
But I just don't wanna be, what do you think of this, and tell us.
No, I think this is something we're planning to do. We're gonna take action on it at the next meeting. If you have any thoughts, feel free to respond, and that's how I would do it.
It would be
Does that seem
good.
realistic?
I think this plan A is fair. Is this gonna be a fair?
It sounds like
That's the
we're
point.
favoring the plan A, which, based on what Jeff said, is no harder to administer by cubic yards, because it's doing it anyway, at least for the time being. And, so I think, do I understand correctly, the goal is to recover the cost differential that this disposal of this material, kind of the cost that it generates for the town, and it's really just a direct not cost, not even the ancillary cost.
Well, and yeah, if you look at the statistics that were provided, majority of this material and majority of what goes into this brush dump is as a result of this commercial use. And so this proposal, the goal is to recoup that money, because those commercial entities are dumping on the behalf of somebody that has hired them to do the work, very similar to the contractors that are coming and dumping construction and debris, or are dumping, building materials or boat materials. We are, as a facility, already charging for commercial dumping for every other dumping. This has had a significant, historically, it wasn't even done on an annual basis. The annual basis has become something more common within the last, number of years. So this is just recouping, or trying to recoup majority of the costs that it costs taxpayers for commercial dumping.
That's good.
And I will say, my first year as a town administrator, so 4 years ago, this was one of the first topics that I picked up. We had sat down with a lot of these stakeholders. They were, at that point, less concerned about being charged and more concerned about the brush dump not being accessible 24/7, which that was, I think, the bigger loophole to tackle, because they're now limited to only when the town transfer station is open, which is a new change that allowed us to be able to collect this information when we really had no good idea who was coming and going before. And so, as Jeff said, I don't think this is expected, and I think these costs are gonna be passed on to the people that they're hiring, that are hiring them to do this. But I do agree, reaching out to them and letting them know is a right thing to do, so.
So what I would recommend is we put this on the agenda for the next meeting as a formal vote, but we give a heads up to the individuals listed here and give them an opportunity, like someone already has apparently, to provide feedback. The board can take it or leave it, but I do think that's a reasonable way to go. And then, like Vika said, we would look at implementing this, at the beginning of the next fiscal year. And in the meantime, we should review also the policy and make sure you don't want to make any changes. So I think we can come back. So we'll put the policy, you'll share a link to the policy online, and if you want to make any edits or suggestions, go ahead and do that. Then we'll bring that to the next meeting and finalize it. And just to be clear, I'm not suggesting we not adopt this. I'm just giving people an opportunity to provide comments, because it's a pretty targeted group of people, and I feel like they should have that chance, and they're generally not, in this orbit with the select board. So but I do appreciate, I feel like with the information provided now, I realize, by both Vika and Jeff, I think it makes the decision-making process pretty straightforward, so. And go ahead.
One suggestion, so you already have access to this document in the folder that you have. So if you are going to make any changes or modification to this, can you maybe try to do it within the next week? So then we can have a finalized copy ready for the packet, for the following meeting.
And the following meeting is what's the date for the?
March 4th.
March 4th, okay. All right, are people good with that plan?
Yeah.
All right, but thank you, this is great, I wish. we
Probably
had-
gonna reach out to those, it'll be phone calls or.
I think as the select board chair, I will email them directly and say that, just giving you a heads up, the board is going to consider, taking action on instituting some fees of wood waste stuff, specifically for commercial, businesses, and, provide them with the, fee proposal and, the policy, and they can provide any comments they want. I mean, I think that's, and I guess they can either provide them in writing to the entire board, or they can provide them in person at the board meeting. Whatever works.
Are you taking any public comment on this?
Yeah, in a second, yeah. So,
And the other piece is communicating this change in information to the community. So that when these businesses are doing quoting, this information about the fee structures come from the town as well. And I think that would be a good, maybe in the calendar, when we do
so you can write the next.
I'll write the next one, but
But-
not until we approve this.
All right, so I guess, before we leave this, we should, you're right, have an opportunity for public comment. So go ahead if you have something to say.
I just want to, Sarah Hopkins, 14 John Small Road. I just want to echo what Liza had said. I think there's a real need for transparency on this. Because, yeah, it's commercial versus residential, but those commercial entities are working for the taxpayers of the town. It's not like North Yarmouth where people will be cutting trees in Freeport and bringing them to a dump. So we're the enemy, it's us. And I think that landowners, taxpayers who are having the work done really should understand the cost that it takes to remove all this material. Because perhaps they would choose otherwise and chip on site or offer more wood for firewood for neighbors or something else. I just think that if it's all done through the commercial entities, that may just get lost in the wash.
Right.
You know, and it's so important, and that brush dump is getting so full that I agree, it's a transparency is the word I'm going for. I'd be pleased to pay my part, and I think others would too, but I don't think people know.
Erhard?
Yeah, I would just want to, I agree. I think this is a work in progress that we need to communicate that then to the community. That any and all ideas that make this better are welcome. And I think it's a discussion that's going to be ongoing, make sure that we let the public know that as well as let the contractors know that. For example, grinding on site, for those property owners that have the space to do that, understanding not only does it help with the dump situation, but it also helps with the fire mitigation. Right, so those, I think as a community, that's a work that we need to keep at the forefront of people's minds and welcome public input and contractor input going forward.
Yeah, and I think it's good that it coincides with this wildfire project we're working on so that we can kind of incorporate some of that discussion with those meetings. But I agree, I think there's some advantages to, alternative approaches. I do see it as the contractor's responsibility to communicate it to their client, just like if, someone's bringing something over and barging it, they've got to tell me that. So I think the town can make an effort to I think, especially the cost of kind of the management of this wood waste is pretty significant and the dangers associated with it. So, and I can also picture the downside that somebody may choose to get the material cut on their property, but not disposed of, then it might sit there. And so there's a whole nother side of things that could happen that might not be too desirable. So we got to think about that. But I think the way Earhart described it as a work in progress, and in which case, we may want to make slight modifications to this proposed plan at our next meeting to phase this in or something like that. So I think, and it is such a small group of people, we know who they all are individually, so that's a little bit more difficult. So any other comments from the public on this? Okay. All right, I think we'll move on and we'll make sure we put that on the agenda. Yeah, so I think we'll move on to 2617 because I know Mike wants to get out of here for the next vote. And so this is a discussion of a communication regarding the Waldo Point stabilization and project from Mike Morse. And there's a letter, copy of a letter in the packet and an email from Mike to Vika. And so this is something we've reviewed in the past. And Mike was at a couple prior meetings discussing with us the stabilization project on the two properties that abut the town right of way down at Waldo Point. And I think, first, before we get started, just to kind of, sort of remind us where we were last time in our discussions with FEMA. Vika, can you give us just a quick summary of where that stood at the last time?
Yep, so this was brought to you at the end of, 2025 in November, and there were some considerations that you had to take into consideration. This particular portion of area is FEMA funded, so we have received funds, and there are specific requirements of how they expect the work to be done. And so while there are some of the in the first proposal that came in, there were some discrepancies about what was being proposed by the client and what was expected by FEMA. FEMA also made it very clear that funding cannot be combined with private contributions. So if you have an area that's costing $30,000 and FEMA is giving you a portion, you can't double dip with private funds. And so the steps that the board had to consider last time was basically to decide whether to proceed or whether to decline to participate. And at the time, the board made the decision to decline to participate, and left the residents would figure out their own properties, and the town, when the time allows, would revisit their particular shore or the town right away. And so that's where things stand now. I did reach out to the FEMA representative to try to share this particular communication to see what the feedback was, and unfortunately I have not gotten back based on that communication. And the one strong consideration with this is we have received the FEMA money already. The town did receive FEMA money for 33-foot right away. We did reach out to FEMA, and FEMA was going to reconfigure based on the 40-foot and provide us some additional funding for that. So we already have funds for this. If the town chooses to accept this particular proposal, which is to cover 100% of the cost, the town will be writing a check to FEMA and sending that money to them, because that will be utilizing FEMA funds and private funds for the same exact project, with it being proposed at a covered cost of the entire cost of it. So that is a strong consideration that you need to keep in mind. If you are gonna open these discussions, we are going to be sending money down to FEMA.
The FEMA funds that you're speaking of, were those specifically just for this project, or
Correct.
a package of other?
There were funds specific for this project. So what FEMA will do is they will tell us exactly what the dollar amount for that project was. So one of the costs was for this particular project was combined with several other ones. So the FEMA documentation has it broken down. But there is about $7,000 to $10,000 at the moment that has been already given to the town for this particular location. And then FEMA did say that they were gonna look at the 33 to 40-foot difference, and then they will find a way to compensate us for that. So though I'm not sure what the difference of that cost is going to be, I didn't get a chance to be able to connect with the representative in time for this meeting to provide that answer, but either way, you're looking at some funds that would have to go back to FEMA.
So it seems to me this has been, we've been over this a number of times, and they've made appears to me to be very generous offer to just pay for the whole thing and get her done. So unless there's some negative reason for us to give the money back to FEMA, I don't see why we don't accept the proposal. Unless you explain.
My
me
question
some other
was, is
reason.
there any,
Yeah,
are we jeopardizing other funds, funds for the other projects that were delineated in the overall FEMA grant by giving back or choosing to do something that we have to give back the one specified for this project?
So the last time this was brought to the town, the offer was 50% of the cost. With this proposal, my understanding is the offer is at 100% of the cost, but the questions that were raised last time in terms of there wasn't enough detail in terms of what the work was going to be like. None of that information is provided in this proposal. In addition to that, GEI did comment saying that the work that was being proposed for the work on the abutting houses, the same extent of work isn't necessary or needed for the town right away because of the protection that it has with the ledges in front of it. And so they didn't see the need for the town to do that extreme level of work. And so my question would be is why is the proposal coming now at full cost when initially the town did say, no, thank you, and in my understanding, chose to not engage in this. But there, there are some, I think for the board, the decision is, do you want to continue engaging in this conversation? Or do you want to stick, to the decision that you made back in November? If you do continue, I think before really saying yes, there would be engaging in really further conversation and more clarifying information to determine exactly what that scope and the work would look like. Because the other thing the board adopted several months ago was kind of being a role model for the type of projects that you're recommending. And there isn't enough detail, in my opinion, in this proposal to know what that project looks like.
Yeah, well, but I would say at the same time, it's not really the same decision. I mean, there's a big difference between the last decision where the town's actually paying for something and needs to have, well, we still need to have the level of detail that you're asking for. I agree with you in terms of what the actual plan is on the project that they would pay for. But it's different when the town was having to pay half the amount before because that, there's a lot of implications with that. So I don't think it's exactly the same decision. I do agree with you. I think we need, well, my personal opinion is it's worth having further discussion about, so we find out, one, we don't jeopardize any FEMA funds other than the ones assigned this project. Two, that whatever the plan is, it would meet, with maybe GI just reviewing it, saying, you sound like you're saying they think it's overkill, which that's not necessarily a bad thing. But, getting a final review on that, and then, see if there's any other potential liabilities or negative consequences to the town, making sure that those aren't there. But if all that's, I think those discussions are worth having, in my opinion. I don't think it's the same discussion as before where we're paying half of it, and there was, so that's in my opinion.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Eric. I have a concern just separate from this proposal of how does the town handle it when property owners want to do it at their cost? Does this set a precedent for other situations where landowners say, we'd like to have this done and it's town property and we'll pay for it, and you've already done that in these other situations. So I think that that's a long range thing that I am concerned about. A second thing is we did adopt wanting to have everything be modeled on our shore, making sure that that's reflected in this plan, which it didn't look like it was from what I saw. So I'd like to see it in terms of having a better sensitivity and reflection of those standards. The third point is, we're making a decision now, and when looking ahead 25 and 75 years, where the water level will be, would some of these structures be, I have this vision of what happened at the Hook when things that were put to stop the erosion ended up having long-term consequences that weren't intended or anticipated. And some of this science, I think, is in that same category. Will 2 generations from now, will they be looking at a pile of rocks with a house that is still not as protected? So I think about that long-term with when we have private property owners offering to pay for this. And it is a unique site where the public access is with the town, because there is that ledge in front and there is that ledge where you walk down. So I think it is a different situation than the abutting landowners. Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I'd sort of say the same, which is what I said the last time. I do agree with sort of GEI's kind of cursory take that there is kind of some natural protection to the right of way with the rock ledge that's out there. I think, the needs of the property owners trying to protect their structures is different than what our needs are trying to stabilize a right of way, and the migration of that right of way inland is not as much of a concern as it is obviously for the property owners who have homes, right on the shore. And I am personally not in favor of adding more hardscape stabilization unless it's necessary, and I don't feel like from the town's objective that's necessary. I think what we may really be seeing is that it will be easier to permit for the property owners if we participate, and having a contiguous, structure between all those properties would be easier than if we don't participate, and maybe Mike can address that particular question. But I also feel like the current amount of detail that we had received previously months ago is not sufficient to really jump in. And I shared the same concern because it's come up, this is now the second time that it's come up about sort of private parties wanting to pay to do something on town property. And I think the lens that I want to look at this through is what's appropriate for the town. It's not about the money to me as much as it is what is the appropriate action on behalf of the citizens of Shabig. Understanding that it could potentially benefit the two property owners, but is that our highest priority? So, and to me, the financial part is a complication, but not an incentive necessarily. For the reasons that Eliza just described. So I guess, maybe Mike, if there's anything you want to address in terms, I guess before we go to Mike, why don't we see if the public has any questions, and then you can come up and respond. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing all that and I agree with some of the concerns. But if it's, so two things. In the fire department meeting, we were talking about the issues of like the nonprofits donating equipment, that things will ultimately become, capital equipment that we'll have to do inventory with, insure, whatever. So you have private entities donating monies or donating, equipment that they paid for to the town. And we talked about the need to have a formal process, but that's done all over the place. I mean, I worked for the city of San Francisco. We regularly accepted vehicles, other equipment and stuff that was, private monies contributing to the assets of the town, which the town ultimately had to own and then be responsible for repairing, replacing or whatever. And now there was a formalized process in which to do that. So I don't think just by definition, private parties paying for something that ultimately belongs to the town, whether it's town property or, something else, is necessarily a bad thing. There just has to be, it obviously has to be legal and it needs to be looked at by our attorney. So that's the one point. The other point I want to say is that if a project, a joint project between the town and the public, should be, does no harm to the town. Does not create liabilities for town, but creates benefits for our citizens, then why would we not at least seriously consider working jointly in a way that benefits all parties, or is neutral to one party and benefits, other parties? Again, I don't necessarily see a conflict of interest there. And it's something, to think about. Now, whether we as a town don't wanna put hardscape on our shoreline areas, and that's. If we as a town and with the community input, that we decide that's a separate issue. But I'm not seeing, I'm really not seeing the conflict of interest. And I think there's ways to mitigate any perceived ones. With consultation with attorneys and such, so.
I guess when it comes to shoreline stabilization, what we've already heard from community members is some people can afford to construct these projects. We have neighboring property owners who likely will be negatively impacted, who can't afford to provide the same level of protection. And, so I do think it's not an individual property concern. It's kind of a more, beach system concern, and that's even true here. And, I think it is overkill for what we need for maintaining a right-of-way access to the shore. And I guess personally, I'm not in favor of hardscaping in the way that I generally understand it to be, which sounds pretty substantial. Because it will scour the sand just like it did at the Hope. It's simply that it will remove sand from the beachfront and really, I think, have a negative ecological environmental impact. That is not something I think the town should support. And I mean, we did, as Eliza said, go through and sort of commit to trying to use, techniques that are the least disruptive to the environment. And I would not classify this as one of those for the needs of the town. And I think we have to understand the political implications that if we are a partner to this project, that's viewed differently than if we are not in terms of applying for a permit. And so, I mean, there are other incentives to having the town as a participant potentially that really aren't related to financial or even, the physical structures. And so I guess I'm a little skeptical myself about, the benefits and to the town. And I'm concerned about the negative impacts to the beach, because having more extensive hardscaping, I think, could have a much more negative impact. And how much are we willing to invest? Because I do think we owe it to the community then to do a thorough analysis of whatever proposed project is, what kind of impacts that would have. In other words, we did have a very cursory review, but I would not be comfortable entering into an agreement without having a legal review and without having a geotechnical or, engineering review. So those are two costs that we would have to incur to pursue this project. So I'm personally not in favor of that. But I certainly wouldn't be in favor of just saying yes without doing those two steps.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Obviously, that I question was, do we want to have any further discussion on this issue? And that's kind of where I was trying to weigh in.
Right, and so, I mean, further discussion is one thing. I think what this is asking for us to do is to consider the proposal and, continue, I guess, but, so I guess that's really where we're at. So I think we can ask, Mike to respond to some of these comments and we can maybe get some clarity. And if you need to come up just so the public can hear.
Do you need to go before any other public comment or?
Oh, yeah, I guess any other public comment first? Okay, Bob, sorry. Good idea.
All the help we can get.
Bob Ernest, 351 North Road.
Your stomach is going through the TV right now, so.
Shake darts. I wanna reiterate, but from a slightly different angle, what Carol was saying. I think any such project has an impact on the broader community. Any seawall is going to have an impact on the broader community by way of this impact on the beach, sediment transfer, the down bank ecological systems. And I think that is our larger concern. I think it's easy to want to help a few landowners in any such project like this, but I think we need to focus on the needs and the benefits of the larger community, which in my mind, the negative impact of any seawall project that I've ever seen is going to be those ecological impacts. And also the impact on the community by way of these costs for legal review and engineering review. And then lastly, just the cost in terms of time and focus at a time when this board and our town staff are hugely challenged with capital projects in front of us. I think the impact on the community far outweighs the consideration of the impact on the community, and this board far outweighs consideration of the impact on 1 or 3 or 5 individual properties. Thank you.
Any comments? No, okay, Mike.
All right, thank you. Mike Morse, Mark Pelago here on behalf of 2 landowners on Waldo Point Road. Specifically Jeff Champagne at 22 Waldo Point Road and Craig MacArthur at 30 Waldo Point Road. And I'll first apologize if my standing up and back signaled that I was getting patient.
No, we know you've got a vote to catch.
Yeah, I was just getting very sore sitting in this.
No point in you staying beyond,
No, I appreciate that very much. So just to summarize here, after the board considered our initial request, or initial consideration that the landowners, abutting landowners would cover 50% of the cost was, it was very generous, but we understand and respect why the board said, well, maybe not right now. And so the landowners reevaluated, how this will impact their properties. And they talked to the contractor, talked to myself as well, and the concern is that if they go forward with stabilizing their own properties, there are design techniques so that they can do that to reduce risk to their properties should there be this one piece remaining that's not stabilized. But it was pretty clear that the exposure or the vulnerability to their properties would still remain to some extent if this town right of way was not stabilized or protected with some legitimate stabilization techniques. Which is what brought me back here this evening and brought this new proposal back to you. It's an offer to the town to fix a problem on the town property that will preserve this town right of way for public access for years and years and years. Sea level rise predictions that may happen, but all we can speak to today is what we know today. And there's vulnerability, there's erosion and destabilization of these areas of shoreline, including the 40-foot town right of way. There's a comment about the presence of ledge, and I couldn't reject the notion that ledge is providing some protection, but from those January 2024 storms, it became perfectly clear that ledge that's visible in some of the intertidal area below the slope just was not sufficient to prevent or curb erosion of that land. So a fair amount of that town right of way was also washed away during that storm event, or those storm events plural. So one other thought here is that, there's discussion about town FEMA, requesting the FEMA funds. And so I'm hearing tonight that the town is less interested in doing this sort of structural stabilization. Yet the town had applied for and received funding specifically from FEMA for riprap stabilization. So it's a little, not to offend anybody, but it's just a little confusing. This is what we're proposing is the same project that the town requested FEMA. FEMA funds for. One of the, so the reason we haven't provided the town with, detailed plans or drawings for what we would propose is because that takes time, that takes, funds, that takes money to put these sorts of plans together. And without any positive direction from the town to say, yeah, we would like to do this, we're just not inclined to provide the town with, you know, detailed drawings. Except to say, I feel we provided the same level of detail that is also in the FEMA packet that was provided to the town. From FEMA saying, this is what this fund, these funds would be used for, which is geotextile fabric and riprap stabilization. And so that's the same, it's a pretty run-of-the-mill project from a shoreline stabilization standpoint. So we provided that same level of detail. If the town was interested in moving forward, we certainly would be willing to provide, you know, cross section and an overhead plan or something like that to help. But that's all you really end up seeing is just geotextile fabric up against the soil and riprap out in front. We'd provide more detail on the size of the stone and that sort of detail. Maybe the specification for the geotextile fabric. The other thing I want to mention about the FEMA funding was the contractor that we're working with for the MacArthur and Champaign properties has had produced a price, a proposal for what it would cost to stabilize the town, consistent with what they do for shoreline stabilization elsewhere. And the cost was somewhere close, as I recall, to $40,000. Whereas the FEMA funding that was specified for this particular right-of-way stabilization was somewhere, it was less than $10,000. And I think the riprap and geotextile fabric was closer to like $6,500 or $8,500. So if the town was to move forward with the FEMA funding, it's just going to be a small piece of what that overall expense would be to the town to stabilize that. In terms of types of stabilization or stabilization techniques on this type of shoreline, we've worked with various landowners and clients where the shoreline wasn't quite as dynamic, wasn't as exposed to the open seas or to a larger, longer fetch. Where we've been able to incorporate different, you know, these nature-based solutions. We've seen where boulders fixed with logs fixed to the ground in front of the eroding toe of the slope as a nature-based solution that DP and Maine Geological Survey support. We've seen those sorts of projects. We've assisted folks with those. But this is a different type of shoreline. It's a much more dynamic shoreline. And I think that's, you know, the damage that occurred here during those January 2024 storms in particular, and even the December 2023 storm to some extent, I think helped to, you know, confirm that or support that idea that these nature-based solutions, coir logs and coconut fiber logs and vegetation just aren't the solution for this type of shoreline. So this would be mutually beneficial, as I mentioned earlier. It would benefit the landowners clearly, which is why I'm here tonight. It's why we provided this proposal. It would help preserve their properties. Jeff Champagne's permanent home is right there at 22 Waldo Point Road. That's his home. It's not a summer place. It's not a rental home. And the amount of land he lost that in front of his home during those couple big storms is just impressive. And so he's trying to preserve his land, preserve his home. Secondarily, this would also, as I mentioned earlier, would preserve the right of way for future generations of Chesapeake Islanders. as a public access point. And the only other comment I wanted to make, aside from that, is just my understanding from the FEMA document that I think Vika had sent to me months ago, was that there are two components for this right of way. One was for the riprap and one was for the access stairway. I think to rebuild that, and again, it was a pretty nominal amount of money. So if the town was interested in moving forward with this, working with these landowners to help them and to help the town with this more permanent stabilization, such that you ended up having to refund FEMA for a certain amount of that funding, I would just suggest that you also talk to the FEMA folks about which component of that was for these access stairway, so that hopefully you don't need to send that back as well. Because I would imagine, excuse me, excuse me, please, this is from a cold in December. I would assume the town would still desire to put a set of stairs up at some point and to have some funding for that. Still sticking around would probably be helpful. Anyway, that's our position on this.
I have, yeah.
We're not.
Yeah, I think we have a couple of questions, and just given that you only have 10 or 15 minutes, I think we've heard your responses.
My last comment is just please don't take this as these landowners or certainly not me, Mark Archipelago, trying to force this on the town or anybody else. This is, you know, I was floored by the generosity of the folks trying Craig and Jeff for offering this to try to help the town while it also benefits them as well.
So, and I guess we do have a couple of questions, and go ahead, Eric.
I just wanted you to comment on the implications that if the landowner projects get done, as however they're going to ultimately design that without doing the land property, one of the concerns I hear expressed, and it's a very legitimate one, is the impact, you know, other abutting properties and generally to our shoreline. So what implications do you, in your professional opinion, do you see of those landowners stabilizing their properties and omitting any stabilization of the, stabilization you're suggesting for the town property versus if it's all done at one piece? Do you see an implication either one way or the other in terms of the impact of the surrounding areas?
Right. Generally from the potential for impact, to the surrounding areas, I don't see that as much. What we're proposing is a sloped riprap stabilization, not a vertical seawall like you see in some cases. Vertical seawalls tend to be old, that's old style. But where a riprap slope allows for wave energy to run up the riprap, and the riprap will attenuate that wave energy so that it will hopefully not be conveyed elsewhere. I guess the best comparison is if we evaluate sloped riprap versus what's there today, which is a vertical bare soil slope. The vertical bare soil slope will function more like a vertical seawall than and convey wave energy to somebody else's property or further down the shoreline. So in this case, the design of the riprap being on a slope plus being tapered at the ends and keyed in at the ends, that tapering and that design is intended to reduce what's called end effect erosion. So immediately at the end of the erosion, end of the riprap, or extending further down the shoreline. So I think that the chances of, according to the Maine Geological Survey, coastal geologists and experts, with studies they've done, these solutions should help reduce or eliminate potential for damage further down the shoreline.
I guess I would be careful, given our discussions with the Maine Geological Survey out here on Shabig. I find that conclusion surprising. So, we could ask them to weigh in on this proposal maybe and get some clarity on that. I guess one thing, I had a couple questions. Earhart, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think a couple questions I have are, I don't think the scale and magnitude of the stabilization hardscaping that's being proposed on the two residential properties is the same as what the town was contemplating for the right of way, and that's understandable. So I don't think they're analogous in any way. And I think if I recall, you have like 6-foot concrete blocks underneath the riprap, right?
Right, there'd be a concrete block for.
Right, so
for
that's-
MacArthur and the Champagne properties, but we would exclude that from the town right of way.
Why? Why would you exclude those?
Because there is the ledge, so there's an opportunity to potentially pin the ledge, pin the lower boulders, riprap to the ledge. And it's gonna be up a little higher because you have that ledge and shallow, overburden, extending up towards the embankment. And from the last round where we spoke with the board here, late last year, there was concern that was just different. I think GEI might have commented it's different from what FEMA had proposed, which was just riprap and geotextile fabric. And so we said, well, if that seems to be what the town would like to have, sort of more of a minimalist structural approach, we'll remove the concrete block core.
So I guess that wasn't communicated to us clearly because I thought you were talking about a contiguous structure. So these kind of details kind of do matter. And I guess one of the questions I have is for the Champagne property, for example. If we don't participate in this project, we being the town, how will that negatively impact the stabilization project on the Champagne property?
Great question. If the town does not agree to do anything, either with the abutting property owners or on its own, with FEMA money or otherwise, and the town leaves that unstable.
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just suggesting that we not participate in the Archipelago project.
Sure.
How will that impact the one I know of, the Champagne property?
Right. Then they would have to move forward with a design that will account for the fact that the town right away would not be at least immediately stabilized. So their design would account for that, but there's still some risk. If the town right away continues to erode with large coastal storms to a point where it starts to extend behind the solution that is designed and constructed for the MacArthur and Champagne properties, then it can start to undermine it, and it's all for naught.
So, and what's the lifespan of, do you expect for this, riprap wall? We've had projects here that have already had to be repaired, and so sort of a dual question: who would be responsible for maintaining it into the future, and who would bear that cost? And is this a permanent fix or a temporary fix?
Yeah, it's a very good, fair question. So the proposal from Craig MacArthur and Jeff Champagne in this case is just for the initial construction and permitting to cover that cost. What happens in the future is, nothing is proposed for long-term maintenance by either of these landowners. Riprap inherently does need some maintenance over time. When clients ask me what that looks like, it may be they need to have a piece of equipment go in and pick up some of the rocks that's left down from larger storms or for some other reason, maybe once every 20 or 25 years. Picks them up, chink it back into the riprap. So based on the proposal today, I think that would be the responsibility of the town.
So I guess what I'm hearing from the board is sort of a mixed review, but not a closed door. And does that seem fair, folks? And I think what I does the board agree that if we were going to go further, we would need a more detailed plan to review? And also, we would have to explore both, the legal implications and the sort of potential impacts or engineering aspects of this and have an independent review. There might be an intermediate option to, get somebody from the DEP or Maine Geological Survey or both to kind of meet with us and have a discussion about sort of alternatives. And, in other words, I do feel that the objectives of the stabilization of the right of way are different than the properties with homes. And that to me is sort of the fundamental problem. And I don't personally, this is me, don't, subscribe to adding all the stabilization if it's not necessary to meet the objectives of, because I do believe over time, these are going to continue to erode back. And so frankly, the less investment we make, the better perhaps, because Mother Nature wins in the end. That's my personal opinion. So, and as, a steward of the town, that's kind of how I feel, but it might be good to get, I think one option would be to have a conversation with some other folks who, at the DP and at the Maine Geological Survey and see if they have some insight into maybe a hybrid solution that could meet everybody's objectives to the best of our ability. And personally, I am loath to try to deal with turning money back from FEMA because, we have a lot, we have $1 million almost from FEMA, and that is a lot. It doesn't sit well with me to send back money from FEMA and even start that process. It's just uncomfortable.
Just to revisit this, so what would happen, let's say the budding property owners weren't there, what would we be doing with this FEMA money?
We are the plan is to stabilize the slope
Just the.
and put the stairway in. I do think we wouldn't be able to do the stairway with the FEMA money because we wouldn't be able to do the project. So we wouldn't be eligible for those funds for the project would be my interpretation, but we can get clarity from the FEMA guy.
Yeah.
But I would say the scale of the stabilization of the two projects is very different, very different. And we're not talking about, the same scale. And I think what we need some clarity on is what, it's a right of way does not stabilize in the right of way. And maybe we don't want to stabilize it in the same manner as we do if we had a house. It's a different objective. And so that's what I see. But I really think the other question that I don't know any of us sitting here can answer is what happens if we participate? What happens if we don't? I think the permitting is more challenging for the applicants if we don't participate. Would you agree?
No, we just have to tweak the design differently so that so that it'll still protect the properties, fulfill the objectives of the project and not cause problems on the town right away.
Right, and I think that is a bit of a challenge though, to not cause problems on the town property. That I don't think that's an easy fix, but at any rate, given the time, you have a comment, question?
Yes, first off, I want to thank you and please thank your clients for coming and we appreciate it very much. It seems like such a simple yet complicated solution, but I want to follow up on something you said, Mike. So it would be when the stones shift for the portion that is town right of way, it would be the town's responsibility to make those repairs.
Well, we haven't just.
If
Right.
it were to happen.
If it were to ever happen, there's no long-term maintenance
Okay,
provision here and what the budding landowners are offering.
great. I just wanted to make sure I heard that correctly. Thank you.
Just one other quick comment, and I don't mean to belabor this, but and this is not to threaten the board, it's not to, put you back on your heels. But the reality of this is, we're willing to carry on the conversations to a point.
Right.
At some point, the landowners recognize that they lost the opportunity to potentially have their property stabilized already for this winter season. And fortunately, they've been blessed with another, 2 winters in a row without any major coastal storms. And at some point, we know we have to go through the DEP process, which could be 6 months to a year. So if we want to try to protect their properties and try to get the permitting completed before and have the construction done before next season, they do have to move forward. So if it's a larger issue for the town to have a broader conversation about, does the town wish to stabilize town properties? And if so, what does that look like? If it's structural stabilization, or is it something else? More power to you, have that conversation. I'm not trying to deter you from that, but for their sake, they may not have the luxury of waiting for that, DEP, geological survey conversation to happen with the select board, other town folks. Again, it's not a threat. It's just, this is just the reality of where they're at. They're down on pins and needles waiting for this winter to end, hopefully without another bad storm, and they just don't want to go through another winter.
Right, and I
Thank
would
you.
say that we did make a decision on this, and it was, your client's option to come back and
Right.
repropose, so I don't feel like we're holding you up. And I do think there are some significant questions we would have to get answered about this, before we can go forward, and one of them would be more detail and some plans to really review. So if you'd have to really consider that you'd have to go further down the track before we could give you an answer one way or the other, because we would want a third-party review. So that's something to consider there too, I think.
So if I'm hearing correctly, it's still on the table for consideration. And really for the next step for the select board to consider it any further, you're looking for some detailed plans.
Right, and I think we can decide whether we want to pursue, I think we still have a call into FEMA, and I think we'd want to hear what that response is. And I think in fairness to the applicants or your clients, we have a couple things we could consider in the interim, whether we want to pursue both financially or even technically. And if it's a no-go on our end, then we could let you know sooner rather than later. I think that's fair.
Sure.
From that
That'd be
standpoint.
appreciated.
Yeah, so I think we can maybe put it back on the agenda. We've got a lot on our plate, and we tried to accommodate this since it came in the door, but frankly, we had decided one already. So I think I hear what you're saying, your clients need to get moving, but this just recently came back to us.
That was their message the last time, and they came back. I just don't think we have another offer. So I don't think you'll see us back again if this prolongs. Is the only thing. So.
Yeah, and so I think we can do a little bit of homework and get back to you one way or the other, but if we get to a point where we're certain either one direction or the other, then we can also let you know. I think
Okay.
that's fair. And so what is your time frame for preparing your, designs and submitting your permits?
We've held off until we had a better idea from the board here, because it will affect our project design, of course. So I'll need to report back to my clients and see what they're willing to do. If they're willing to wait a few months, they're willing to provide a more detailed design to the board, then we'll let you know.
Okay.
And we'll let you know too if their decision is let's just call it a day and we've got to move forward. I'll let you know that as well.
Yep.
So
That's fair.
keeps you from having to.
So I think on our end, we'll get some more clarity that will come to the board from FEMA. And I think the board needs to consider whether they're willing to kind of take that step one way or the other, and then sort of what other things we would want to have, and then we can give you some guidance after that.
Sure.
Does that sound reasonable?
It does. One question I have is, would it be helpful if he has, and I know we're looking at the clock, if you're able to provide any additional information on top of what you already have? It sounds like you have a pretty good idea of plans you guys have and whatnot. And then we can use that information to pass on to, the FEMA representative, potentially GEI, to have more additional information to then allow for that process of, you know, decision making. So then when we do bring it back to the next agenda item, the board isn't kind of revisiting it again. It's, they
Right.
have all this compiled information with additional information potentially to help make the decision and kind of more final versus doing it, like, we need more info type of steps.
Yeah.
So we can provide you with a, you know, cross-section from another similar project that we've done. It may not be as exactly specific to the elevation here, it may not be exactly, you know, from a horizontal or vertical perspective, it may not be an exact match for the town right-of-way property, but it was really a pretty darn good idea of what that would look like. So.
Yeah. So I think, feel free, you can also communicate with Vika in between, but if you want to make your vote, you probably. need to
Yes.
go.
Thank you very much for
Okay.
considering it again.
Yep.
I do appreciate that.
And do you have transportation to the vote?
To the driveway near the boat, yes.
Well, do you need a ride, do you think? One of us can get.
Yeah.
Okay,
I can make it.
all right,
If you needed to leave the car there, we could move the car to the driveway.
Oh,
I don't want you to miss your boat.
it's Tom Fedele's truck and he's across from the tennis court. It's like.
yeah, so
I think I can run.
if you can't make, I don't know,
Just,
a good reason.
if you go right to the vote, we'll move your car.
we'll move the vehicle. Yeah, just park there.
I'll let Tom know. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very
All
much.
right.
She'll miss that boat. Just go park down there.
Because it's 9:15 otherwise.
Yeah,
right.
All right,
thank you.
so that was that.
Yes.
This is- So I think, we'll bring this up at a future date. I think the more information from those folks would be helpful, so we can all be on the same page about what we're talking about. And then I do think we need to hear back from FEMA. And, you know, personally, I'm a little, I think we have what we need from FEMA, and whether we need to get into this arrangement is a question in my mind, but I'm happy to talk about it further. Anyway. And I guess why don't we move right on to the Grinnell land swap, which is
We
sort of.
missed it agenda.
Yeah, we still have to talk about the
The
hall.
hall.
Oh, okay. Well, I was actually gonna come back to that.
Oh,
last, but
okay, I'm sorry.
Let's move on to the Grinnell land swap or, property owner proposals.
Yeah.
So that's 2018, and this is to review the Grinnell land swap information and determination of next steps. And since I've been on the board, this has come up, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. It predates all of us, well, maybe not David, but all of us on the board. And so it was, I think there's a pretty good, history here that Vika provided in the memo that, it started before the fall of 24 when, there actually was this, property transfer, but in 2021. So I think, so basically, does everybody understand the issue and where we're at with the Grinnells? They've been back a couple times, and I think our direction to them was to come back with a specific proposal, right? A while back.
The last conversation where it was left off was, yes, the board wanted something a little bit more concrete with a more specific proposal with a little bit more of, not hand drawn type things, and there it was expressed that more or less that they didn't want to do that because there would be costs associated with that, and so I think the preference was to have the known fact that the town would be signing on to it before they proceeded with that. And so what was provided, and it's in the packet, it was a counter proposal basically of asking to give up a piece of town land, but it was just a hand drawing. And so the town more or less said that they weren't interested, but the question was raised and they are interested on revisiting to see if the town would engage in that. And so what I need from the board is the direction of, do you want to continue engaging in this discussion and if so, have very specific requirements instead of these back and forths of what the expectation is, or do you want to, tell them that, you know, at this point, the town has too much going on and, they can't take this matter on? But either way, I would appreciate some direction so I can connect with them to let them know what the next steps are.
I have a question, so obviously it was well involved in all of our conversation, but. Is there a reason why they can't do an engineered septic? Above ground septic or ground on the property they're proposing to, you know,
I don't think that question's been answered.
because, I mean, that. They're suggesting beside the land swap of maintaining their septic on town property, which is crazy. I totally would not accept that. But I don't understand, at least from, you know, there may be rules that I'm not familiar with, you know, zoning and septic placement and all that stuff, or whatever design they have for whatever they're gonna do to their property. But I don't understand why they can't do an engineered septic above ground on this proposed property that they would swap with us. And leave the TP6 location of their septic on town property on. Just, that's the question to me.
Which page are you looking at? Because
I'm looking at this map, which is showing this is.
No,
how
so,
they have-
no, you're looking at a completely wrong thing.
Yeah.
So what you're looking at is what the current deeded land is.
Oh, we
And
have a long strip along the road.
that was, so the document that's in here is the lawn strip, if you're looking at the page that has lots of colors on it. That was the original.
Earhart, you have to look at this.
That was the original layout. And the blue strip is exactly what those property owners owned.
Right.
Which was not been buildable, they couldn't do anything with it. What was deeded and went through town meeting and what they currently have is the piece that you were just looking at, which is a rectangle. Which, once it was deeded, it's theirs, the town has their property, they came back to the town and they said that they determined that it's really wet. And as a result, they, the initial proposal was, what they at one point suggested was basically taking those 3 acres, which are wet, putting those in conservation and giving the town, buildable 3 acres off of or giving them
The town
off of the
gets-
town's land, 3 acres that are buildable. The town said, no, thank you.
Right.
And then the town offered to have an easement on town property to allow them to have a septic because the cost of the septic for the way that it would have to be designed on their land would be expensive.
You just answered my question. So TP6 is the proposed location. It's the only place that perks for septic.
For a standard conventional.
For standard conventional, and the cost to do the engineer septic is not something they're willing or want to do, right?
And so the proposal as it stands now, the town asked for more specifics and more professional recommendations and designs, and what came to me was what is the last page of the packet, the color piece of paper, basically hand drawing of what their new proposal is, which is to keep their 3 acres and then take 1.7 number of town property and give that to them. That is what they're currently asking this board to consider, is
Give it
whether
to
the board would be interested into engaging with this and moving forward with this.
Why wouldn't the town sell that land to them?
Well, I mean, this has been a long saga, I don't think logic comes into it, to be honest, but I mean, I think that we did first suggest at one point, you know, they speak with the code enforcement officer, this isn't really a select board issue. Then, you know, then they came back with this proposal, so we did say, well, you know, maybe an easement for your septic on the town property, but apparently that's not something they're interested in. They want to own the property and they want us to give them the property. So I think that's the but to me, this is not what we had requested in terms of a proposal in any way. We were really looking for a formal proposal that I could understand. And it isn't really until he could just explain that I fully understood what they were asking. I thought they were asking for a swap, not a gift of more property.
They also did, so they did come to a meeting and they made it very clear that their interest is to be able to take their 3 acres of land, split it, and be able to sell a portion of it and then keep the other portion in the family. So for them to be able to work within the plans that they have, the easement or the suggestions that the town had wasn't really helpful or working, which is why this is the new suggestion. And few things to keep in mind, this town 15 acres of land is the property that the facilities committee is currently working of relocating a fire station in the future. I have strong recommendations of having an offsite parking lot in that area someday for the board, potential, housing. So there are, this piece of land is very valuable for the town for other projects that the town has. And that's something with whatever direction you provide to me to let them know. Please consider that this land isn't just sitting with nothing happened to it. There are active goals for doing something with this land in the future.
So I will say that, we didn't get into the engineered system discussion too much. I mean, there's not been a lot of details since I've been involved going back and forth, and other than the Grinnells sort of trying to find would like the town to find a solution. The lot that was transferred was not buildable to begin with, that was the swap. We did investigate, and apparently the town of Shabig made no guarantees that the lot that was configured for them was going to be buildable. I mean, it wasn't part of the agreement.
There was no testing done at the time of the land swap. Neither the Grinnell family or the town bothered to do any kind of testing to determine how wet the land was. And it was after the deed and the transfer, and they were ownerships of the land for a couple of years, that my assumption is probably when they started going through the process of figuring out what it would be like to split and whatnot, that this was determined. And so they've come to the town a few times. The town has either asked for more information or said that their current proposal was not of interest. And so this is really the newest thing from the last communications that they had asked to revisit again.
This seems the due diligence for the original land swap was really on them, which wasn't done. And they got themselves into a situation where it's not buildable, and how long it's not buildable, they can't put a structure on it because of the septic, with a separate issue. But I don't see why we need to come to the rescue here. In my opinion, it's, I do think that's valuable land that we have, and I wouldn't support giving an easement, nor certainly not giving away the land.
Okay.
I don't even know why it's kind of amazing to me that they're even asking the question, in my opinion, and, I understand they wanna make it work, but I don't know why we're talking about it, honestly.
Okay, well, we've been there before. So Richard, did you have a comment?
I tend to agree. It bothers me that this is coming up again. We're spending our time doing this, and especially in light of the fact that this is valuable land to the town. We got own plans on it, that we need to let them know that we don't want to pursue, we don't plan to ever pursue this, and just to put it to rest.
Right.
Put the idea to rest, rather than letting them, we'll think about it. Let's just tell them what we think.
All right, Eliza?
I would agree. In looking at this, it says the study was done by someone with 30 years of experience. And while they do have a record of that, it was done in April, which is a wet month. It just seems to me there could be more opportunities not that I'm a land specialist, but that TP6 is pretty far up. And
Well-
anyway, so I guess I just wanna say this, they agreed, all parties agreed in good faith. And in looking at the needs of the town long range, I wouldn't be interested in giving up an acre and a half for this project.
Right, and I think.
Absolutely.
So I think we can be clear that we're not interested in transferring any property to the Grinnells. I think what we might want to make some, I mean, I think to kind of echo what Earhart just said is I think this keeps coming back with the intention of trying to get the town to find a solution, and I think we've done all we can do. Is that a fair thing to say? And that, you know, we provided all the options that we were going to provide, and we are not interested in a land swap, and, you know, they have to pursue their own needs on their own, I guess, to develop the property, and it might be not exactly what they wanted, but that's not our responsibility. Is that clear enough?
Good.
Do we need to take a motion or anything? I don't personally.
No, I don't think so. It'll just be a fun email to write tomorrow.
Oh, gee.
And I can write the email. Would you rather have it come from me, from the board?
I can write it and share it with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the message is, we definitely have no interest in transferring property, town property. We feel as somebody, I think it was Eliza just said, this property swap was made in good faith, it's done, and, we're done. And, they can work with the resources in the town through the code enforcement office to, try to resolve their wastewater disposal challenges, but it's not really a select board issue. Does that seem fair? And that was a message we sent a while back, but
Yeah.
maybe we just need to send it again.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of technology out there that could help them, I believe. All right.
Okay.
So the last thing I think the last agenda item is the agreement with the hall and, the rental agreement, and so that's there, it also relates to their request for an additional, we have been paying them $4,000. They've asked us to bump it up to $7,000. That was actually based on usage calculated, and it's actually cheaper than the before we leave this, did you have anything you wanted to add, Ethan? I'm sorry. No, okay. Yeah, so we're really talking, I think, on this agenda item.
Were you going to offer public comment on this?
Oh, I'm sorry. See, that's like I've had it, because it's been, we're in the third hour since 5. I'm sorry, Bob.
Bob Ernest, just really want to support 100% the direction you guys are following. The deal was done, suggestions have been made, it could help them, they've not followed up on those suggestions. For the benefit of the taxpayer, please just put this to bed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so I think we need to be really clear that we're done. So any future, assistance really may have to get on it. All right. So we're back on to 2616. Sorry about that, guys. Thanks, Bob. So this is the hall. And I think the major thing with that is, we've had a memorandum of understanding that we haven't signed several years, right?
There's been an MOU, that really has been very inconsistently signed once or twice when Marjorie was here in her 6 years. Once during the time I was here, and so they asked to sit down, and Eliza and I sat down, and they really kind of drafted a new agreement, and so the document in the package shows you what the difference was between the old agreement and the new agreement. There aren't any dramatic, major alarming changes. They're all pretty straightforward, simplifying some of the information. The suggestion that I had was that when it comes to the emergency use, That and how the hall operates, if for an emergency use is irrelevant to the town using it on day-to-day needs for halls. So I would eliminate that out of it, and I would make the date to be based on the fiscal year versus the calendar year, because that's our budget cycle. But other than that, the MOU is pretty straightforward. The reason it's coming in front of you, obviously, is because of some changes from what had been original. And then the other part is the cost, which the $3,000 difference has been added in the budget, so it is currently reflected in the current budget. And after hearing them and them sharing with us how much more it would be costing if they were charging us per daily use, and us having an opportunity to share some feedback about some observations that have been made, to ensure that if we're being charged, that they're not paying for services, that they're not receiving cleaning and setup and a few other things. And so, in my opinion, it was a very productive conversation. Eliza could speak to it if she disagrees. But I would hope that the support takes into the consideration the MOU and the few small changes, and supports the added cost in the facility, in the hall rental, and that's all I have. I thought I'd have more to add, but I don't, that's it.
Plenty.
So you're suggesting we change this to fiscal year, that the restriction for the disaster thing comes out of the agreement?
Yes, it wasn't on there before, and when we were talking to Sam, she said, yeah, we just put that in because they are an emergency shelter. But them being an emergency shelter is irrelevant to what the purpose of us renting it and the needs of it being a rental. And so, but that's that's how the board, you guys are the ones that ultimately make that decision.
Well, and the other thing that I think the first page is Town of Shabig Island, the second page starts talking about the renter. And I think it should, just to be clear, it's always the Town of Shabig Island that this MOU is for. So I think we should just make it consistently the Town of Shabig Island, and like the renter shall remove all equipment trash with the Town of Shabig Island.
Yeah.
So because they, I will say, I find the key situation cumbersome, and,
Yeah.
maybe if we, the town, had an extra key that we could, I don't know, it's just having to go get the key, it's a complicated thing sometimes, especially if it's not a regular thing where you guys are here. So that's just I'm not gonna not sign it, but it would be nice if we had a
Yeah,
better
and
key system.
as the renter, we're allowed to modify their lease agreement, and I find that having to chase down the key pretty not convenient. And
I mean, I have a key, and
Oh,
we
you
could
do.
definitely bring up the point that can we make another
Right.
spare key
For the
and
town.
have it at the town office,
That's
so
what I
if
would-
anybody from else is needed
Yeah.
it. Then they would come to the town office to get it.
That's what I would like to have an extra key that's a town only key. So I don't have to take Chris's keys, well, haul or other keys sometimes or whatever. I just would like to have an extra
Really?
key that we can use, that's a spare key for the town. You can throw it in the mailbox or whatever, but that way I don't have to connect with a human.
Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just,
I want to just make a report too about the meeting. It was a very positive meeting. It was clear that both parties, the town and the hall committee, are really needing to make a commitment to preserve the use of this building, to preserve it for public access, recognizing that this is such an important part of island life. So it was nice to hear all of us on the same page. There were one of the suggestions that we talked about that didn't get followed up on was a key lock. I mean, keys are
Yeah.
old technology and we love that. But
I know,
a keypad would be a great way to do it, and keypads can be changed if the number needs to be changed. So I like that. And I also want to just say that they indicated that they're now working on a 5-year plan, looking down the road for what are the needs of the building. So I was really pleased to hear that. But it's a lot of work for those volunteers who are taking good care of this building. They're being good stewards of it. And so I was pleased to hear that. They've hired someone to work up to 10 hours a month doing maintenance. That was an additional cost that they have, and it's clear that the building is going to benefit from that. And it takes the burden off the people who are volunteering to keep track of it. You know, we all know we just can't have everybody volunteering to do maintenance anymore. So that was a good improvement in, I think, the plan for the building. So, I was pleased to be a part of it. And when I look at the increased use of the town and looking ahead to the fact that with the comprehensive plan coming up, we'll probably use it more. This is seems like a good deal, and I wanted to just say that it was a good meeting, it was productive, and I think it's a nice offer for them to just go up 3,000. I didn't mean to say it like that, but it seems fair on both ends.
I think they justified it as being even less than the actual cost, so I think that's very fair.
Oh,
So
and-
that helps.
And the last thing I want to say is, really, let's be realistic, if there was an emergency, we had to use it as an emergency shelter,
We're not-
which has been done in the past, we're not gonna have a town meeting, it's gonna be available, so. You're right, it doesn't need to be in there,
For the
but
day-to-day rental, that's,
yeah, it's good to know. for
we can
people.
keep it in there if you want.
I kind of like it, actually, but.
And I guess to that end, since we are paying sort of flat fee, I would encourage, you know, committees that are meeting in person to meet here, where it's public, it's easy, you know, or the town. It's better now that we have the rostrum in the town office. I mean, I think, you know, avoid the rec center and other places because this is sort of the public meeting.
I think that has become more common, and I think that was the reason for a pretty good spike in use of this building for town purposes, so.
Yeah, and I think we also have had the fellows running a lot of programs, and so they've really added to the use of the building. So anyway, I think, so can we approve this with those suggested changes? Is that sufficient? And do you need a motion for this?
So if you wanna make a motion to approve this, then, that approval would give you the authority to be able to sign it
Yeah.
once it's updated and.
So somebody wanna make, well, and I guess let's say with the two amendments, David, are to change the fiscal year, change it to fiscal year 20.
Change it to fiscal year versus calendar year.
Yeah, and then the other thing is make sure it's town of Shabig Island.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it came from what they're using for other renters.
That's right.
yeah.
David, I want to make the motion. I was at the meeting.
I just want to.
So moved. No, so, okay, so, I'd like to, for 26-16 to approve the CIHCC rental agreement with the town of Shabik, reflecting the change in the dates with the, consistent with the fiscal year, and indicating that the renter is the town of Shabik Island. How was that?
Excellent.
Did you get that?
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, we're not gonna, I just think the key is, we're all gonna figure out eventually which way to keep that.
All in favor? As well, I'm in a lot of discussion, and I just wanted to remind people looking at the, meeting, calendar that we could put on the back of the CA report. I think the coastal waters meeting is actually the 24th, Tuesday, not that it's a big deal. But we have a select board school budget meeting on March 3rd, and then we have a board of select board meeting on March 4th, and then on Saturday, we have the nonprofit budget meeting. So it's a busy week, the first week of March. And so I think until we hear back from the fire department, I don't think there's much we can do on the operational budget. But I think when all the numbers come in, including the capital, there might be some adjustments we're gonna have to make, and so, stay tuned for that, but I think getting the fire department information in. And I think I can send out an email to the fire department from from me, but from the board, just asking for their cooperation and offering whatever assistance we can to help them complete this task. And it sounds like there's some bigger, long-term concerns about, say, per diem employees that we're gonna have to start thinking about, so, in budgeting items for one thing, finding them and solving that problem is another thing, so. Anyway, but just the first week of March looks pretty booked here, so.
Can I just add one thing to that? So the email that I sent you all on Friday, did you all get that when I sent the reminder with about the packet being ready and all of the different links? So one of the comments that I made in that was, and the link provided was to the folder to all of the submissions from the nonprofits.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know whether you have had a chance to look at it or not, but it is a lot of information. Please do not wait until a day before to look at it. I mean, there is Island Commons, one of the documents is 40 pages. There is a lot of information. The nonprofits went and put time and effort to look through all of it, to submit it. And it would be helpful if you as a board, not to sound like a mom, but took some time and looked at it, because I think that has a lot of information that describes, if you notice, there are increases that are being recommended. And so that information provides those supporting documents for those increases. So it would be helpful if you did take some time to look through all that information, because March 7th is the nonprofit discussion. The board did agree to make the process more fluent, to do the MOU that was asked, and do not ask them to come up and stand up and do a long presentation.
Right.
So that document is your presentation, so
Yes.
please look through it. And then in the current budget, those numbers are added to reflect those requests. And then at that meeting, you can make the decision whether to ask me to remove them or. So,
right,
thank you.
and so I think to that end, reviewing that information ahead of time, and if you have questions, you can reach out to the individual nonprofits by email, copy the entire board and Vika, so we all know what the question is and we don't ask redundant questions, but you can get your questions answered ahead of time and not have to, because they're not necessarily gonna be here that Saturday to answer questions. So I urge you that if you read through the material and think, well, why are they asking for $6,000 more? I don't see anything changing, or, I don't agree with that justification, or provide more backup. Do it ahead of time so that we're prepared on Saturday, because in the past, they've come and kind of justified things, but that's not the game plan this year. And it is a lot of material we have. At one point, we asked the finance committee to evaluate kind of the contributions to the nonprofits, but that's not on the agenda for this year. So that's sometime into the future. So right now, we have not received any specific recommendations from them relative to the nonprofit contribution. Maybe in the future, but not this year. So I think, if there are any other questions about that, I think moving on, Vika, did you have any other business?
We have a motion on the floor.
Oh, we do? Would,
Yeah, I seconded it.
oh, sorry.
You guys voted on it.
Yeah, I
You
thought.
all raised your hands.
All in
The
favor?
motion for the town, the hall.
For the hall?
Yes, that was, you raised your hands, you voted, we've moved on.
Right, because I was sort of going back to this. All right, so.
But wait, excuse me. It says here that the facility meeting is the 26th. It's actually the 19th, according to the email from David.
Tomorrow we've got, okay, well,
Make sure it's.
when I create these, that doesn't mean that's the permanent, things change. Just like you now have,
Make sure you get your housing committee up there then. Right, if you have a meeting coming up,
Oh,
you
yes.
need to
Oh,
get
yeah.
on the list.
Yeah.
So we did shut down the
We
climate action team because they hadn't pre-advertised their meeting, which was the right thing to do. And so they had to reschedule their meeting because they hadn't noticed it. So we are kind of getting pretty rigid about just making sure people notice their meetings ahead of time in case the public wants to attend.
Well, we made really good progress last night and
Great.
the next meeting is ready to go and the minutes of the agenda's ready. We're
Great.
meeting.
All right, so moving down the agenda so we can wrap it up here, other
Yeah.
business. Anything, Vika?
The only thing, that I have for other business that, I usually write it down and I didn't, that I could think of is, with the ongoing update that we've been giving you about Axiom and the meetings with Island Institute. We had agreed that Axiom would be fully paid off by the end of the
Yeah.
month, and they agreed to send a $30,000 check right away, and then the rest of it by the end of the month. And I just want to report that, we did receive the $30,000, so they said exactly what they were gonna do, they did, so, they have a little bit to fulfill the rest of it, but that was good news in terms of the communication and what, we were told was gonna happen. So,
And I wanna thank the Island Institute for getting involved, because I think that really helped, yeah, and that's, and now we just need to make sure that continues going forward, but I do think that was a, graceful way to get the problem solved.
And we do have a meeting with them at the beginning of March to kind of check in that, did you do what you say you did? And I think that's probably helpful to kind of keep them accountable for providing that, so.
Yeah, but anyway, thank you for you guys, for your heart and, Vika for following up on that. Okay, anything from the board on communications?
Just what I mentioned.
Yeah, so what you mentioned, yep.
Okay.
Yep. And I think, I did sort of have a reminder from Jeff Putnam. At some point, we want to revisit the, surveillance cameras, on the signage or, down at Chandler's. So I think I will check with him, but maybe, we want to get that back on the agenda when he can attend. So I'll keep you posted on that. So, so other than that, I don't, and we did, I would say we could put it on the thing, but we did receive a grant for Cousins, so that was for almost 70,000, so that's good news. It's some money we don't have to spend. All right, so next is to approve the minutes of the February 4th, 2026 meeting. And Chris sent those out. Does anybody have any changes or amendments to those minutes? No?
Nope.
Okay, a motion to approve.
So moved.
David, so move, second. Richard, and all in favor? All right. And, if there are things you want placed on a future agenda, well, you can let Vika or myself know. I think I am a little concerned as I look at the schedule. We have a meeting with the school is our next meeting. And I don't know that we have any particular game plan for that. So I think, and sometimes those meetings have been not particularly productive from my standpoint. So I think what maybe I can do is put some thought into it with the chair of the, Vika and Aaron, and maybe I can talk to the chair of the school committee, and we can at least try to come up with a structured agenda so that we get something done. Because sometimes in the past, it's been a very awkward meeting and it hasn't felt particularly useful. So if we're gonna take the time to meet, and if anybody has any particular issues they'd like to have covered with the school committee, school and the town, it would be good to, know those ahead of time. I think one of the questions we will be interested in is just, what's the scheme for sort of the enrollment and, what do they see for local enrollment and how are they planning to subsidize it? I think that's a fundamental question, but then, any other questions we might have about school operations. The picture is pretty challenging in a lot of small towns, not just ours, and Long Island is in a pretty critical state. So it's, it's challenging. So I think understanding their vision of the future, but also melding together, so they have a big drop off in the debt service. Or we do, but we need to kind of, we're already planning to pick that up for capital improvements. So, and I don't know that they have any significant capital plans. I don't think so. Yep, so, But every time I see that bus go down there empty, it makes me gag.
Oh,
You know, the bus goes down empty and the kids get driven down. I'm like, why are we doing this? So I don't know. And then Riley walks down.
Cause I won't drive her down.
Right. So anyway.
There's a bus for that.
And if people don't mind, if you could share individually with me when you're gone. So we just know, and it's not, I'm not trying to keep tabs on you, but I know Eliza, you're traveling, Earhart, you're traveling, and it just would be helpful to kind of have people's, I'm away, and I don't know, Richard, if you're leaving, but.
So actually, I rescind that, but I'll send you an email.
But if you could just send me like, I won't be here, I'm no judgment, just I'm not here during these dates, so I know, so that we can kind of keep track, because.
Okay, but I booked it right in between all of our dates at that time.
Yeah, but things come up, so I just would be helpful to know whether you're here or not here, and that way we know.
Okay.
And there's a lot happening in this next couple months, yeah.
That's
So,
good.
anyway.
Yeah.
Well, we have a card, I'm gonna let people read it themselves, it's too long to read, but it's a thank you card from a resident, so. I'm gonna pass it down, but it's really to the road crew.
It's fan mail to the road crew, and I think it's,
Oh,
I
that's
knew
what we're
that
gonna
this-
follow.
I knew that this was coming.
Ah,
It's nice to see this, and it's been a conversation I've heard with this person and several others, being very grateful for the quality of the roads this year, and being aware that it's a new crew and they've been really conscientious, and I think it's a really good thing for them to hear.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'll take a look.
You can see Tanner's face, how excited he gets when
Oh, yeah.
he's gonna go plowing.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Good job.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Anybody?
I can't make a motion.
Motion.
Somebody please.
Richard made the motion,
I'll second it.
Eliza second, all in favor?